For those of you who somehow don't understand what an iceberg image is, the idea is that much like a real iceberg, there's much more beneath the surface than you initially think. Iceberg images take this idea and apply it to video games, TV shows, books, movies, and other genres of media to present facts and trivia that most people don't know about the series. On the surface level, most people will probably be familiar with everything, but deeper down the information gets more and more obscure. I've made a Meat Boy Iceberg video in the past, and I'm glad to say that that one is all but obsolete as of this video. This time, as opposed to skimming over the topics, I'm going to go in depth and explain everything that this image has to offer with as much detail as I possibly can. And I'll be offering every single source to where all this information can be found, links in the description. Most importantly, before I start anything, I want to give a humongous shout out to Meatsona on YouTube. He and I had been talking for a really long time, and the minute I told him I wanted to do an in-depth iceberg video, he was immediately on the case and gathered up all the information that I needed in less than a week. This video is more his than it is mine, and I highly suggest you go to his channel and check his stuff out. The videos he's made are really interesting and in-depth, and I really enjoyed them despite going in with no knowledge of the subject matter. The iceberg I'll be covering is a slightly different iceberg from the one before, and the creator of this iceberg deleted his account on Reddit, so I can't properly credit him. But I'll leave the link to the original iceberg in the description. Here and there, I'll also be making my own edits. This could be including entries from the old iceberg that pertain to the new entry, and I'll even create my own entries to net certain information together. Lastly, before we get started, I'm going to put a big old trigger warning right here and now. Yes, that's right, some of the subjects on this iceberg will go into sensitive territory not safe for the kiddies, including disturbing imagery, explicit language, sensitive topics, and a whole lot of sex. I'm warning you right now, and I'll even put an icon above certain entries that contain upsetting content, but I'm going to keep the tone light. This is Meat Boy after all, and I'm not going to be like those other guys that throw in jump scares and stuff like that. I hate those guys. So without further, Meat Boy. Oh, still dumb. Super Meat Boy Forever. Alright, we are off to a great start already. Super Meat Boy Forever is, well, I hesitate to call it a game. It is a continuation of the critically acclaimed Super Meat Boy, made by Team Meat all the way back in 2010. This, however, was created by the post-2017 Team Meat, which is a different set of people altogether. For the sake of this video, I'm going to refer to the 2010 Team Meat and 2017 Team Meat as Old Meat and New Meat, respectively, just to avoid any and all confusion. This also relates to the communities following the teams, as the two games have drastically different fan bases. Old Meat, the team responsible for Super Meat Boy, who was headed by the indie game scene legend Edmund McMillen, who has his name on plenty of other extremely fun and synonymous titles, such as Gish, The Binding of Isaac, The End is Nigh, and many other projects that I will be talking about momentarily. Alongside him was Tommy Rafinis, lead programmer of the game. Tommy is a supremely talented individual who took Edmund's direction and made it come to fruition, creating the greatest 2D platforming game of all time. The game was way ahead of its time and set a new precedent for ultra-tight precision platforming that would go on to influence more modern titles such as Hollow Knight, Celeste, Levelhead, and Garlic. It even inspired my own project that I hope to create in the near future, BioLoom. This time around, Tommy Rafinis is the head honcho, covering programming, art direction, story, and marketing. He was quick to market the game as a sequel, while conveniently forgetting to say that it is an autorunner. For a little context, imagine Jetpack Joyride was suddenly ported to PC and then they charged $20 for it. Not a fantastic idea, right? This was a major turnoff for a lot of people, and many people were turned away from the franchise as a whole, including less than favorable reviews from even the most lenient of game journalism outlets. What's even more surprising is that not a whole lot of people knew that this game was based on a mobile prototype first created by Old Meat in 2013, and it was something that Edmund himself was not very fond of, citing many times that the random generation of levels presented in the game was something he was initially open to, but as he worked on it, he started to see that it wasn't a good fit for platformers. This is ultimately what inspired him to do organic, linear level design in The End is Nigh. After Tommy acquired the franchise, which I'll be getting into very shortly, he decided to scale the game up for a fully fledged console release, changing next to nothing in terms of the design philosophy from the prototype intended for mobile games and throwing in attributes that made the game extremely undesirable, such as the previously mentioned random generation, the inclusion of much longer levels taking on average 1 minute to complete, an extremely mishandled ranking system, and a new Game Plus feature that turned the game into a grindy and tedious mess for those wanting to shoot for 100% completion. On a more broad scale, it was canned by fans both new and returning for lacking a lot of things that the original had, such as a distinct, one-of-a-kind art style, catchy and upbeat music, third-party indie characters, and most importantly, the amazing sense of free-flowing, ultra-tight control, coupled with stellar, open-ended level design that we've yet to see in another game of this kind. After the release of the game, Tommy and most of New Meat are very apathetic towards criticism, and even going as far as not talking to anybody about the game or engaging in feedback. It's a sad state of affairs, seeing as how it was the fanbase that elevated the original game to the status that it's at currently. One of the more important factors was the idea by Tommy to have have this game funded by Epic Games, and it's not unreasonable to assume that they were his go-to, considering the fact that he mentioned in the past that he has some connections within the company.
Actually, my backup plan, honest to God, was I was going to go work for Epic.
Oh,
because
wow.
I was in North Carolina, I had contacts at Epic, and I had my job previous to that was porting the Unreal 2X to the 360, so I knew the engine. So it's like, all right, well, I go to Raleigh, there's all my friends, and I'll just kind of settle into that.
As such, the game was doomed to stay on Epic for a whole year, per the deal, suffocating its reach on PC. It's gotten to the point where I've talked to complete strangers who know what the original Super Meat Boy is, and upon telling them that a new game came out, they were totally taken aback, having absolutely no idea that it was even a thing. That's also combined with a lackluster marketing campaign involving nothing more than a few quickly thrown together clip show trailers, and a strange fixation on promotions with other third-party entities such as G Fuel, U2s, and Makeship. It gives the impression that this game was an afterthought, which I'll definitely get into momentarily. I've talked a good deal about this game, and I have a big long video over on my alternative channel, explaining in depth every single issue that the game provides, and furthermore, solutions that could have mended it. After you've checked out that video, if you still feel inclined to play it, go for it by all means. The best way I can describe it is that it has the sustenance of a bag of potato chips, and you'll end up wanting something more immediately after. It would be interesting to see how this game would have stayed afloat without the Epic deal, but I guess that's a story for another timeline. WiiWare. As it turns out, Super Meat Boy on the Xbox 360 was not the first console port of the game that was planned. Development for the game on consoles began on WiiWare. This is even shown on the first version of the Meat Boy website. Edmund was first contacted by Nintendo as a result of a video he made where he called Reggie Fils-Aimé, the director of Nintendo in America, on the phone. Edmund had already met up with Reggie in person beforehand, in which he told Edmund about WiiWare. However, Edmund wouldn't get his foot in the door until he released the video, after which Edmund was contacted by the head of WiiWare development.
I was recording myself calling Reggie because he and I had talked. I have proof that we did. He said that he told me about WiiWare and they were looking for any developers, and I just couldn't seem to get through. And when I put that online, I was contacted by the head of WiiWare development, and they asked if I was seriously interested in working, and I said yes, I would really like to work with Nintendo on something and get something on WiiWare. And that was around the time where I had just released a game called Ether, and they said Ether was perfect, and we were talking about that, but I didn't know anybody who would be able to program that. And around the time when I started talking to Tommy, and me and him started working together on Gray Matter, was around when Meat Boy came out, and I'm like, Meat Boy was just way, way more popular than Ether was, and it's also a bit more, straightforward to the point, and retro, and kind of sums up the whole Nintendo old school vibe, and I thought it'd be more appropriate. And
originally, Nintendo was interested in another one of his earlier games, a space exploration puzzle game called Ether. However, Edmund decided to go with Meat Boy as it was not only more in spirit with Nintendo games, as you can sense the palpable Mario influence within the game, but also that his own account in the Meat Boy Q&A featured in the Basement Collection states that he was interested in doing Meat Boy simply because it's a franchise that he's already done, wanting to somewhat play it safe and not mess it up for their first time on an official console. Unfortunately, the WiiWare version would be infamously cancelled due to the game's file size being too large for a WiiWare title, which had a strict limitation of 40 megabytes. Initially, he and Tommy tried to work around this, such as splitting the game into episodes or removing content from the game.
But then we have the Wii version, which is going to be a pain in the ass because Tommy needs to shrink 500 megs to 38 megs.
Oh, yeah. One very astute commenter once pointed out that I should just use compression. So, thank you. And I will.
How is that even going to be possible to get it down so dramatically?
I don't know, really. I'm gonna do my best. It will definitely have the entire game is not a problem. It's the audio that's a problem. You might have some crackly sounds on the Wii version, but whatever. The Wii version is crackly for almost everything anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Maybe just send people CDs that they can listen to while they're playing it.
It'll be like an old-timey movie where you have to play the record and watch the movie.
Yeah.
Or maybe just have it as a silent movie, and every time you die, the word splat appears on the screen. Something like that.
That'd be kind of cool, too.
Yeah.
But they ultimately didn't want to release a compromised version of it. Demo builds for the WiiWare version are most likely lost based on Tommy's word, but there is a small chance that they may have survived. Flash Meat Boy. 2 years before the Super Meat Boy we all know and love, Flash Meat Boy was released to Newgrounds, serving as a prototype for the full game that we would end up getting. It was created by Edmund McMillan and programmed by John McEntee, whom I'll be talking about later down the line. It's important to note that Edmund knows Tommy Raffinis at this point, but he had no affiliation with Meat Boy besides providing one of the levels in the community level pack that would get released. The game is supremely simple and plays surprisingly smooth for a Flash game, having the same philosophy as Super Meat Boy in terms of being provided a simplistic set of controls that you can slowly but surely master over the course of the game, something that is not even remotely present in Forever. There are some minor problems with collision and the fact that the movement is analog as opposed to the dynamic movement available on a controller, but beyond that, the level design and art style are pure Edmund, being nothing but wholesome stupid fun plucked right from the early 2000s. You could easily chalk it up as one of the greatest platformers ever made in Flash, considering how restrictive it is. Having been in this franchise since the very beginning, with this being one of the first computer games I've ever played, I totally recommend it. It can be played on Newgrounds still, and it's available in the previously mentioned Basement Collection, a selection of Edmund's old Flash games. If you play it through that version, you can also unlock the community map pack after collecting all bandages, and the Q&A featuring Danielle is also unlockable and listenable, and it features plenty of interesting tidbits of information that any Meat Boy fan would find interesting. Ultra Edition. The Ultra Edition is a boxed retail edition of Super Meat Boy, released on April 15th, 2011. Fun fact, I first picked up the game on Xbox a day before this version came out. It included a 40-page booklet with some developmental sketches, the now iconic mini poster drawn by Dave Raposa, who works for Marvel Comics, the game's soundtrack, a handful of highly requested sound effects, and some more bonus content including wallpapers and concept art, all for just $20. It was also marketed as having Alien Hominid from the Xbox 360 as an exclusive, but in reality, he was made accessible to anybody with the Steam version with the release of the Ultra Edition. And speaking of the Steam version, the disc in the Ultra Edition didn't actually have the game on it, but just prompted the user to download Steam and use the Steam key in the box. Edmund also included this stick figure drawing with the Ultra Edition copy that he sent to Game Informer. Overall, it's a cool package that was made for fans of the franchise, and very much in line with the quality that went into the first game. Thankfully, we got something fairly recently in the form of the indie box reselling of the game, with Dr. Fetus getting free reign over the marketing and smearing the whole box with Fetus propaganda. The collection itself features a Steam code, an installation disc, a soundtrack disc, a buildable Meat Boy figure, and Dr. Fetus' signature remote that conveys a very special message from the real Dr. Fetus.
This message is special because it can only be heard by morons. Please never forget that you are a failure. The person that pressed this button is an idiot.
Mr. Minecraft.
Oh, Minecraft. I cannot wait to play Minecraft.
Everyone and their mother knows about Minecraft now, being the best-selling game of all time, winning several awards, and even going as far as being introduced into school curriculums mandatorily in the Victor Rydberg Secondary School in Stockholm. For all you filthy Americans out there, that's high school. But back in the day, when Super Meat Boy was first being released on Steam, Steven Minecraft, the main character of the game, was prominently featured as a playable third-party character. Back when Minecraft was much more obscure and a legitimate indie game being worked on by one man, the Swedish-based legend himself, Notch. This is extremely soon in the game's lifetime, and back then he didn't have a name for Steve until its 1.0 release in 2011, and so he was dubbed Mr. Minecraft. Later patches of the game fixed it to call him Steve, but us real G's remember when Meat Boy named Steve. You can't get any more badass than that. Super Meat World is a portal for player-created levels added into Super Meat Boy after its initial launch. The game also had no internal level editor at that point, so it would have been basically pointless. It was initially launched as a bonus chapter featuring 140 levels created by players, other game devs, and Old Meat themselves while the level editor was being worked on. The level editor launched 1 month later as it was built from the level editor Tommy created for Edmund to create levels in the base game, as mentioned by Tommy and Edmund in certain interviews.
I have a question. You said that you plan to include the level editor for the PC version of Super Meat Boy. I was wondering how flexible is it? Can you create your own characters or background art for the levels?
No, it's actually, I guess eventually we could expand it so you could make your own palettes and stuff. But right now it's basically the exact same editor that Ed has used, but it's all of the palettes that are already in the game. You could make every single level in the game except for the boss levels. And as far as characters and stuff, we don't have that open up, but it's a possibility that we could open it up later on. But initially it's just going to be a friendlier version of the editor that Edmund currently uses. But depending on how it's received and how people like it and stuff, we may expand it so people could maybe add their own characters and stuff like that. But that's a big if. Mm-hmm. But it is a possibility, but just not something we're currently planning on right now.
Okay, cool.
Since then, the interface hasn't been updated to be more accommodating, so it's kinda fallen into infamy as an extremely tough to use tool for those looking to get into level design and game design as a whole. There is, however, a tutorial for the level editor made by Edmund that can be found. 2010 and 2015 soundtracks. This refers to the two different versions of Super Meat Boy's soundtrack. The game's original soundtrack was composed by the absolute C.H.A.D, Danny Baranowski, who also did the music for Flash Meat Boy. However, starting with the release of the PlayStation 4 and Vita versions of Super Meat Boy on October 6, 2015, Danny B's music was replaced with a new soundtrack. It was made by Ridiculon, a brand spanking new video game soundtrack band featuring a longtime friend of Edmund, Matthias Bossi, who also voices the intro for The Binding of Isaac. Along with them was C.H.A.D, a well-established video game composer of Hotline Miami fame and a longtime fan of the franchise, going as far back as making fan levels for the Meat Boy Community Level Pack, while also making art that appears in Super Meat Boy. And then there was also Laura Shigehara, who does the music for Plants vs. Zombies. But her role in the soundtrack was minimal at best, and basically everybody forgets about her. But she did directly talk to me about her work on this game on one of her live streams one time, so we're basically totes besties at this point. Naturally, this left many fans confused, as many had grown to love Danny's music. Next to Edmund's departure, the reasoning for the change in soundtrack is one of the most speculated on topics amongst Meat Boy fans. According to Tommy in a post on the Team Meat blog, the reason for the change was because Team Meat wasn't able to secure the rights to Danny B's music for the PS4 release of Super Meat Boy. Danny himself would go into more detail in a blog post titled "Regarding My Super Meat Boy Soundtrack." In this post, he stated, quote, "Hey guys, many of you have probably already seen the news, but my soundtrack for Super Meat Boy will not be in the PS4/Vita versions. This is because I no longer have a working relationship with Team Meat. You may also know that I did not do the soundtrack for The Binding of Isaac Rebirth. I've made a decision a couple of years ago to end my working relationship with them for many reasons that don't really need to be listed here. I apologize for any disappointment this may cause my fans. I've heard rumors that there were creative differences between us. This is not true, or at least was never communicated to me. I own all the rights to my music, and Team Meat approached me to license the music for the PS4 and Vita versions. I didn't feel like the licensing fee and exposure through PSN they offered was enough to make me seriously consider accepting the deal. I decided to decline their offer. I wish them and the new artists the best of luck with the game. I genuinely appreciate all of the outreach from the fans today. I love you guys, Danny." Fan speculation tends to focus around financial reasons, such as Danny B not being satisfied with the cut he received from The Binding of Isaac and asking Edmund years after the fact for an absurd amount of money. However, I believe the reasons for his departure were not financially motivated, but due to personal reasons. Bear in mind, Danny B is the same guy who created music for Super Meat Boy, knowing that there was a possibility that he may never get money from it.
The thing about Meat Boy development that I think a lot of people don't understand, because a lot of people think that we have money, number one. They think that we're funded by Microsoft. They think, all this sort of stuff. We don't have any money. Tommy's gone into the red negative many, many times. It's been very hard development-wise. Danny and our sound guy, this is all like for the love of the game. They're gonna get paid when we get paid, which will hopefully be in a few months. They're giving us their time and praying and hoping that the game does well so they get paid. So this has just been all love and trust, and we don't have any fucking money.
Financial struggle is a recurring theme within Team Meat interviews from 2009, with Edmund recounting a history of poverty and Tommy going in the red several times during SMB's development. It's pretty odd for the same guy who did this to also barge in out of the blue, demanding to be paid a ton of money. So what could have possibly caused Danny to end his working relationship with Team Meat? We can guess based on what Tommy and Edmund said about Danny in recent years. On Discord, Tommy said that he did make an attempt to reconnect with Danny at some point, but to no avail. On January 2nd, 2019, Tommy says, quote, "I will always be fond of Danny's original music, but I am a little sour on it due to the circumstances. Musically, it's still fantastic, but I'd rather play the game with the 2015 soundtrack that has no baggage," end quote. Tommy also made some really passive-aggressive statements about Danny's work on Crypt of the Necrodancer. On September 26, 2018, he says, "I see him every once in a while at like Con/GDC, and I really want to tell him I enjoyed the Necrodancer tracks, but I don't." He follows this up by saying, quote, "I tried to reach out a long time ago to no success. I don't try more than once. End quote. Ultimately, Tommy has been pretty vague about what happened with Danny, but what about Edmund? At first, Edmund was also vague, making statements such as this one, asking whether Edmund would be working with Danny in the future. He replies by saying, quote, "Sadly, I don't think I'll be working with Danny again on anything. Long story short, creative differences, drifting apart, personal stuff, don't ask. But I've worked with many different musicians in my day, and I'm sure I'll work with many more as time passes." End quote. However, unlike Tommy, he was eventually willing to go more into detail about what happened between Team Meat and Danny. On March 30th, 2020, Edmund would reply to a fan asking about Danny with this, quote, "We drifted apart after choosing Ridiculon over him for Mewgenics. That event snowballed a ton of misinformation and bad blood that ended any future collaborations. I love Danny, though he's a great guy and musician, shit just goes wrong sometimes." End quote. Funnily enough, I brought up this exact topic on the Team Meat Discord asking Tommy if something along the lines of Danny B being replaced was the cause of the rift. He replied to me himself saying that this was not the case. If Edmund's account is to be believed at all, then it feels pretty gratifying considering that an admin's comments about Danny wanting more money, a prospect that seems even more erroneous based on our basic research, are still up to this day. It definitely goes to show the more prominent anti-Edmund bias within New Meat. Whichever way you want to spin it, Team Meat lost 2 prominent players in its lifetime, and it will never be the same. Now to talk about the other player, Edmund himself. The Team Meat split is easily the biggest cause for speculation in the Meat Boy fanbase, and easily the biggest influence on the franchise in this entire iceberg. The short version of the Team Meat split is as follows. Tommy and Edmund were together, now they're not anymore. Simple as that. The old Team Meat dies, and like the legendary Phoenix, the new Team Meat rises from the ashes. Even though it's not really a Phoenix, it's more like a bucket of KFC. The long version goes much deeper though, far deeper than we expected in our research. So buckle in, it's gonna be a big one. Although not revealed until Eurogamer published an interview with Tommy on September 26, 2017, fans had been speculating about the split months earlier. Starting in April 2017, Edmund began responding to any questions about Tommy and Super Meat Boy Forever with, "Tommy and I are working independently." This went on for months, with Edmund also appearing to not answer questions related to Tommy in Reddit AMAs. That is until November 13th, 2017, when Edmund first publicly announced that he was no longer a part of Team Meat, having left in December of 2016. At this point, info about what caused the split was sparse, with Tommy saying that he and Edmund grew in different directions, while Edmund claimed that they were motivated by different things and that life pushed them apart, in a much similar vein to the split from Danny B. That doesn't answer much, basically being the equivalent of Tommy and Edmund blaming the split on creative differences. As we all know, these types of vague responses from creators typically hide something deeper. Make no mistake, Edmund and Tommy have every right to keep their business private, but we can still speculate on what caused the split thanks to statements by Tommy and Edmund in the years that followed. To start off, it's very possible that bad blood developed between Edmund and Tommy. When asked by Eurogamer about the possibility of Edmund's return, Tommy stated that people shouldn't hold their breath for it. He then describes his time working with Edmund by saying, quote, "Yeah, it's interesting without divulging too much, but for a long time it didn't feel great being Team Meat. I was thinking, I'm just going to leave this." End quote. In the Team Meat Discord, Tommy has also stated that he and Edmund had not spoken or seen each other in years. In the same server, Tommy also lamented having his hands tied from 2012 to 2017. This isn't coincidental, as this was the time frame when Tommy worked with Edmund on projects in developmental limbo, like Forever and Mewgenics. But to top it off, there's Tommy's response to being asked what his biggest achievement in the past few years was, when he outright claims that, quote, "I think my biggest achievement in the last few years was recognizing that I was in an abusive relationship with a person and completely cutting them out of my life. That's a hard thing to do." End quote. Some of you may be thinking that this refers to a romantic relationship, but Tommy has been with his wife Shannon for years now, dating as far back as 2012 and having a child to seal the deal. So it's safe to assume that this is talking about Edmund, especially considering the humongous workload Tommy had when working with him.
I never lied to Tommy, but I definitely would only say things that needed to be said in appropriate times. When I didn't want to overwhelm him when he was fucking overloaded with shit.
Yeah.
I felt guilty enough as it was to report a bug to him, and when I know he was losing it, when things were so stressful, I tried my best to be a friend and make sure I was looking out for him and his health and his best interest. What I would do is I would make sure I saw a moment of right when I saw Tommy getting happy. If I turn on the webcam and I see a little half smile of Tommy, I'll be like, "Oh, well, good thing you're smiling, Tommy, because there's a list." Yeah. Here you go. You know, you got to, of course, wear a lot of hats. And the end of development, I of course, had shitloads of level edits, and I did what I could, but realistically, the amount of bugs that I had that I could fix were probably a good 2% of the bugs overall. So Tommy had a shitload of work to do, and, you know, all I could do is, you know, hand jobs.
Yeah, there was no real sleep. My parents were bringing me dinners at that time because I didn't have any money and I didn't have time to like cook anything. So what they would do is they would come over, and when they would come over, I would usually stop. There were quite a few times where I wouldn't stop, and I wouldn't even really recognize that they were there. And I would just continue working through them, preparing everything, and then leaving it for me. But a lot of the times I would just lay on the floor, and in between the time that they walked in the door and got the food ready, which was basically throw it in the oven for 10 minutes and heat it up, that's when I got my best sleep. Because it was a time when my brain could go, okay, we can shut off for just a little bit. So like
they caught that in the movie. There's a part in the movie where Tommy falls asleep while I'm talking.
Oh yeah, I just fell asleep.
That was like an incredibly common occurrence. Well, like if Tommy said, "All right, I'm going to lay down on the floor," I knew that he was going to just nod off at some point. Like he was just going to.
Then there's Edmund, who describes this period of his life as one of the most stressful. Although not known at the time, Edmund has gone on to say that by the end of 2016, he was considering quitting game development for good. This isn't a coincidence, as Edmund described his desire to quit and other personal strifes at the time as the inspiration for Nye. In an interview with PC Gamer, Edmund cited bad experiences working with other developers as a reason for why he wanted to quit. Edmund stated, quote, "I was ready to be done with games. I just wasn't getting what I had gotten out of it. I just had a bunch of terrible experiences when it comes to designing and working with people," end quote. He spoke of similar sentiments in an interview for NoClip, with Edmund even citing the Team Meat split as one of his struggles.
The End Is Nigh was a game from the darkest part of my career, essentially. I was living here, we just moved in here, and I'd gone through a bunch of bad personal, family things that had happened, and my wife had a seizure, and we didn't know what was going on, and it kind of started questioning what I wanted to do in life, and maybe I was valuing certain things higher than others. And it was around that time where I left Team Meat as well. So that was done, and that was put behind me, and Danielle got pregnant, and we decided we were going to have a kid. And I was kind of stuck in this mode of like, what am I doing in games? Like, is this what I want to do anymore? Like, I had gone through so many experiences with just a string of really bad experiences, both personal and business-wise, threatened lawsuits and bad shit. And I just really felt like I don't want to do this anymore. And I thought, well, I could write about it. I could write about not wanting to do this anymore. And it was kind of a re-envisioning of Meat Boy in a way when it came to the difficulty aspect, where Meat Boy was like, Meat Boy is about challenging yourself because the outcome is worth it. And The End Is Nigh is about challenging yourself and questioning if the outcome is worth it. I wanted to make a game that felt like you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it never drops and you don't know when. And I wanted to make a game about stress and anxiety.
However, it goes beyond that because the last project Edmund worked on with Tommy, Super Meat Boy Forever, also influenced Nye. Edmund consistently describes his time working on Forever as a rough experience with him not being satisfied with the end product. He even cited working on Forever as the reason why he didn't use randomly generated levels in Nye, as I discussed earlier. So it's clear that there was some tension between Edmund and Tommy. It would be surprising if there wasn't, considering the hustle of game development, but that still doesn't answer why Edmund left. Even with all the other issues, what was the big fracture point that made him decide to leave? Well, think back to earlier when they both mentioned wanting different things game development wise. There's more truth to that claim than meets the eye, because when talking about his time on Team Meat, Edmund regularly brings up two ill-fated projects that he worked on there, Mewgenics and another one we'll get into deeper down the iceberg.
We actually worked on a secret project that was never officially announced as a Team Meat game before I left Team Meat. Still, that never saw the light of day.
Although Edmund describes Forever as a stressful experience, these two projects were painful for Edmund for a different reason. Not because of stress, but because he didn't want them to be cancelled. When asked about both projects, Edmund explicitly mentions that he never wanted to cancel these games, instead they were cancelled by someone else who shared the IP with him. Needless to say that this was referring to Tommy Fehr, who referred to the period when he worked on these two games as being a time when he had his hands tied. This is backed up by other claims by Edmund. In an interview with Game Informer, Edmund mentioned that Tommy didn't vibe with the project, so they went on to Super Meat Boy Forever instead.
I know, like, when working on certain projects, you can usually feel within the first few weeks or few months of the project how big the wave is. Like, how far is this going to carry, right?
Okay.
And for Mewgenics, on my end, I had this huge wave. I felt like I could ride this thing for 3 years, development-wise, but not everybody else was feeling it, and it kind of just died, like, right there. And it was like, well, I guess we'll move on to something else. We can, do Super Meat Boy forever or whatever else, but...
While Edmund wanted to work on Mewgenics, Tommy most likely wanted to keep working on Forever. This is a safe assumption, as Tommy would go on to finish Forever after Edmund's departure. This also makes sense considering that Forever was Tommy's baby in a way, as he had created the original prototype for it back in 2011.
Yeah, it's just the same thing with, like, the Meat Boy the game stuff. It was, like, prototyped in a hotel room, and I'm like, hey, this could work on a touchscreen, and I think it could be pretty fun. Like, there's never any desire to be on any platform. There's just desire to make a game and then put it on platforms that it'll work on.
However, there's also another reason why Tommy was hesitant about these projects, because in this same interview, Edmund also elaborated what he meant by Tommy wanting different things.
It was a lot of stuff. Things get complicated and lives change and people kind of grow apart and, everybody has different things that they feel are more important than other things. And, I really want to have fun and try to really enjoy making games and not worry too much about, something being successful or guaranteeing success. And I'm not the kind of person that really worries too much about that stuff either. So I take bigger risks and bigger risks aren't the most comfortable thing for everybody, I think.
This, in my opinion, was the major schism between Edmund and Tommy. Edmund wanted to work on 2 new IPs, with one having the potential to cause major controversy, while Tommy, on the other hand, wanted to work on Forever. This isn't the only case where Edmund cites Tommy's lack of risk-taking as a reason for his departure, but we'll get more into it later in the iceberg. For now, though, we'll just show these 2 posts from Edmund a year after he left Team Meat. Green Hills. Green Hills is the placeholder name for the very first chapter in the mobile prototype of Super Meat Boy Forever, and it has existed as early as 2012 when the game was simply called Super Meat Boy the Game. Even the new Meat version of Super Meat Boy Forever, seen at PAX, had the name Green Hills as the first chapter. It was eventually changed to Chipper Grove in the final release. Schrodinger's Foreskin is a meme circulating around the Team Meat community and went fairly viral when the tweet was first made. It was in response to a fan who asked the question of whether Meat Boy is circumcised or not. The tweet reads, and I quote, "Meat Boy can circumcise and uncircumcise himself at will, so the answer is both." It's like Schrodinger's foreskin. This is just nothing more than a ridiculous tweet that got a little bit of mileage and is thrown onto the pile of nonsensical things the Team Meat Twitter has gone on record saying. Russian artwork refers to a cover art contest for Super Meat Boy's PC release in Russia, who would be getting the game before anyone else on the PC platform. Edmund promoted the contest with a video of him wearing an authentic Ushanka speaking directly to the Russians, every single one of them. The contest was catered towards the Russian fans of the game, since nobody could make a Russia-inspired cover better than they can, seeing as how they live there. His suggestions include vodka, bears, and Tetris.
Spinning pile drivers. Zangief. Facial hair. What am I doing? Vodka. Bears. Tetris.
Tommy Rapinus.
Eventually, Edmund made a blog post announcing the winner, as well as other awesome submissions for the contest. It's just an extremely fun piece of trivia revolving around reselling the game, and it's an awesome example of interacting with the people you're making the content for. The winning art piece depicts Meat Boy wearing a Ushanka, holding up a picture of Bandage Girl, multiple Mosins equipped with bayonets pointed at him, and a statue of Lenin and St. Basil's Cathedral in the background. Very Russian indeed, and a great piece of artwork all around. Meatsona is referring to a bizarre playable character in Super Meat Boy Forever. He's also the playable character in the Test Your Meat Cursed Warp Zone minigame. Successfully beating the minigame will unlock him as a playable character. He's no doubt inspired by Mortal Kombat, being a real person wearing a costume and transposed into the game based on real-life poses. The minigame he hails from is also inspired by the Test Your Might minigame, also from Mortal Kombat. A little bit of digging is enough to find that the true identity of Meatsona is none other than Tommy Rapinus. Along with providing the model for Meatsona, he also provided some key voice lines. His in-game sound effects are courtesy of the sound designers of this game, Power Up Audio. It's nothing more than a silly character, one of the more tasteful ones in the game.
Yeah? Do they look as awesome as the game pieces?
Wait, there's lots of other characters if you don't like the Pixie Sorcerer.
No, there aren't. They're all just the same with different costumes.
The name itself may be poking fun at fursonas. People in the furry community wear costumes of their fursonas, so the parallel is a dude in a Meat Boy costume. A Meatsona, if you will. One of these days I'm gonna go to PAX with my own Meatsona costume and it's gonna be sick, but I have to get into shape first. Super Meat Boy Forever's many delays. Super Meat Boy Forever faced many delays over its arduous lifetime, even going as far back as when the game was slated to be on mobile devices. The very first delay occurred when it didn't meet its 2015 release date due to personal reasons on Edmund's end, and Edmund taking a break to work on Fingered. Updates on it were radio silent in 2016, save for being shown at PAX 2016 before the mobile version was cancelled. Moving on over to New Meat, it was first announced to be coming in 2018, as seen in the very first announcement trailer. However, in December, another trailer was released announcing that it would release in April 2019, and April 2020 for Steam, per the Epic Games deal that New Meat was signed onto. But when April 2019 came, it was announced that it had been delayed until it was ready, with Tommy claiming that he didn't want to announce a date only to miss it, seeing as how he's already done that twice at this point. 2019 would come and go, nothing. Super Meat Boy Forever wouldn't release until December 2020, well over a year after its original release date in April 2019. One of the reasons the game had such a long delay was because of the cutscenes not being finished. You can see in the trailer for the game that there are some cutscenes that got changed between development and the final release, as well as a few scenes being removed entirely, per the video on the lead animator's YouTube channel showing off unused assets such as a few scrapped animation sets and a completely finished cutscene depicting Meat Boy reaching out for Bandage Girl and pointing up into the sky in fear. This could also mean that the story went through a few redrafts, if you can believe that, as what happens in the final game is quite different from what happens in this scene, as there would have possibly been a new enemy or something of that nature. Another big reason is the large amount of time needed to test the thousands of levels in the game. Convenient, seeing as how the level design and overabundance of poorly made levels is one of the things people criticized the most about the game when it came out, being exceedingly one note for Meat Boy standards and unfinished at certain times. Hefty delays are nearly synonymous with New Meat at this point, and it contributed heavily to Super Meat Boy Forever's low notoriety and abysmal reception. Platform exclusive characters. Between the Steam and console ports of Super Meat Boy, there's a significant difference in the unlockable characters in the game. Both of them have choices that reflect the platform they're on, with a few crossing over between the platforms. The 5 Warp Zone characters, Commander Video, Jill, Ogmo, Flywrench, and the Kid, stay the same across the 2 versions, but the Bandage unlock characters are wildly different. On consoles, it's Gish, Alien Hominid, Tim from Braid, Spelunky Guy, the Pink Knight from Castle Crashers, and the Ninja from N. On Steam, it's the Head Crab, Joseph, Nija, Runman, Viridian, and Steve. A few of these characters are reskins of each other, such as Gish and the Head Crab, as well as Joseph and the Pink Knight. These characters play identically to each other, and a few of these are entirely original, such as Spelunky and Nija. One thing that's pretty weird though is the requirements for all these characters being switched around. I plan on doing a video covering all the different characters, and I find some of the requirements for them to be off.
What the hell is even that?
An example is Joseph and Pink Knight. They're the same character, but Joseph requires 30 bandages and Pink Knight requires 90. And I mean, they're not stellar characters. 30 bandages is okay, I suppose, but 90 is a little ridiculous. On top of that, some characters are objectively better than others. For 50 bandages, you get Tim from Braid and then Nija. Tell me which one you would rather have. Would you rather get the cocaine fish, or would you rather have Tim from Braid, who is quite literally a gimmick character? Tough choice. On PC, they seem to realize this and make him unlockable with a cheat code, but the console port got the shaft in terms of characters. And, as I mentioned, Alien Hominid is present on both versions, with the console version requiring you to get 30 bandages, and the Steam version requiring you to get 30 bandages. So you unlock 2 characters for the price of 1. This whole thing is very confusing. Let's just move on. The Cutting Room Floor blog post. A Bobo original entry, but it's a catch-all for a few things, mainly pertaining to cut content from the game. The Cutting Room Floor refers to a blog post Edmund made after the release of Super Meat Boy. It details a ton of interesting things, including pieces of concept art, many of which were abysmal, a few different environmental set pieces, a few early level design screenshots that ended up getting changed into what they are now, and a few concepts that ended up, well, on the cutting room floor, including an early version of Lil Slugger, which I'll get into later, and a different map system in which the map is locked off and you're unable to progress until you complete 2 levels, and then a lock will open, allowing you to move on to the next 3-level set, a system taken straight from Flash Meat Boy. There were also a few characters that didn't make it into the game, as they couldn't get the rights to some, or they chose not to include them for gameplay reasons. I'll touch up on one of them later on, but here are some of the others. Teal Ogmo from the Jumper series, made by Maddie Thorson and the creator of Celeste. So I used to play Jumper a shit ton when I was younger, and I had no idea that these 2 games were made by the same person, and it blew my balls off to find that out. He was originally going to be added in to avoid confusion between Meat Boy and his retro counterparts, but eventually normal Ogmo was added in anyway. The Mondo Priest from Mondo Medicals, created created by Cactus Software. He was going to function identically to Commander Video, being able to float for an extended period of time, being a direct upgrade to the Commander. He was eventually scrapped as Edmund didn't want to include a better version of another character, wanting them all to be unique, even though that doesn't line up because the kid is a better version of Agmo. Finally, the Golden Knight from Bonesaw the game. And fun fact about that actually, Bonesaw was made by Kyle Pulver, and he actually became the lead level designer for Super Meat Boy Forever. That's pretty neat, I guess. Overall, it's a cool piece of history outlining what could have been. It would feel pretty weird if they went in another direction and gave us a game different from the iconic experience we ended up getting instead. Rival Rush is a Super Meat Boy card game. It was originally announced with only the title, with Team Meat asking people to guess what Rival Rush would be. This was also reflected in the first Rival Rush website, which was just a logo. It was later revealed to be a card game. Yeah, needless to say, it was a letdown, but the game itself is a harmless 1v1. There's a whopping 3 videos on the game, one of which is just in another language.
После данного этапа подготовки начинается второй этап – перебежка.
And 2 of which are from New Meat themselves outlining the rules. And one thing that's quite interesting is that both videos from New Meat refer to the universe of Meat Boy as the Meat Boy Cinematic Universe.
Players build decks and face off as characters from the Super Meat Boy Cinematic Universe.
Strange choice considering there's no movies, only video games. I'm sure that won't come up again. The rules to the game are exceedingly simple and don't take long at all to get used to, and a single game can be completed in less than 5 minutes if everyone knows what they're doing. If you aren't in the mood for shelling out money for this thing, it can be played on Tabletop Simulator, or you can print your own cards for it. The one thing I'll say is the cards themselves are really well drawn and expressive. Makes me sad that these guys didn't make art for Super Meat Boy Forever instead of what we actually got. Indie Game the Movie. This is a movie that covers 3 fairly popular indies, including Braid, Fez, which later becomes infamous for Phil Fish's cancellation of Fez 2, and the one you all know and love, Super Meat Boy. This movie definitely helped to get a lot of eyes on Old Meat and the tribulations they faced in the most stressful period of development for Super Meat Boy, with both Edmund and Tommy going in-depth during interviews. Both of the men were fairly inspiring in this movie, and it not only captures the moment-to-moment action of developing a game, but the difficulties of time crunch. It's never fun in the moment, but they can either produce the best or worst results. However, Edmund and Tommy were also critical about the film and its trailers exaggerating the tension between the two. Tommy had to clarify in a separate interview that a scene of him screaming on the phone that was framed as if he was talking to Edmund was actually him talking to Microsoft.
It was a real little roller coaster ride with Microsoft, and definitely had highs and lows, and it's hard not to.
One time I threw my phone at the wall.
One time I screamed at the phone, and then I thought, oh my god, how the fuck am I going to call you and explain what just happened?
I know, I remember that.
Oh my god, that was a fucking horrible day. I don't know, like, I feel like, I actually think that Indie Game the Movie was there through most of that.
Yeah, they were.
So, you guys will see that. Like, you'll see all this fucking horror. That's the thing, too, like, and I'm sure maybe one of the questions you ask is about this, I might be jumping ahead, but in the trailer, there are parts like when I say I feel like I'm in a concentration camp, and when Tommy's saying, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Like, what I was talking about was dealing with Microsoft.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't talking about making video games.
Yeah.
Like, I was talking specifically about, like, this thing that we're locked into that we have to finish with Microsoft, and I feel like I'm being tortured daily.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm stuck. Like, I felt so fucking stuck. And it was horrible. And then when Tommy's saying, what the fuck is this, is when he's scrolling through the fucking...
It's just scrolling through the dash launch day.
When our game's not there.
Yeah.
Speaking of, this documentary also captures a ton of the tension working with Microsoft and Xbox, an experience that Team Meat would go on to speak about in a negative manner in many, many interviews. And I really mean many. There was a point where Team Meat seemed hesitant to release more games on Xbox for the time being, due to their bad experiences with them.
Considering like the difference there was in terms of like reception and sales, etc., on both Steam and Xbox Live, do you think you guys would make another Xbox game in the future?
I don't think we'll work with them ever again. And I guess, like, it kind of sucks too, because, like, we're still on really good terms with our producer, who is really awesome, who also happens to be the producer of every other good game on the fucking system.
Everything.
And
every notable game, he's been the producer on.
He was really awesome, and I felt like he was the only person there that really believed in us.
He felt like a friend.
Yeah, he felt like a friend.
He still feels like a friend. The way I figure it is, we have an engine that runs on Xbox. It's all TCR compliant and all that stuff. But I feel the only way we'll work with Microsoft is if it's more on our terms, which I don't feel that they'll ever want to agree with. Meaning, like, no exclusivity term, you know, nothing that's going to make more work for us to put the game out on their system.
Yeah.
And that's more of the reason why I don't think we'll work with them. I mean, if they want to do all that stuff, then yeah, we'll definitely consider it, because then we get to work with our producer again.
Yeah.
And he was great, and we'd go into it knowing, you know, all right, take all of this stuff that they say to you with a grain of salt.
Yeah, we'd also know how to work a contract, too.
Yeah.
Like, we went in knowing, like, a lot of the mistake and what a lot of the postmortem, I think, should really read as, like, we're putting all this stuff out there because make sure you get all this stuff in the contract. Like,
yeah, get everything in writing.
The game feast wasn't even close to when we signed a contract, and we never asked for any revisions when it was happening. So all the stuff that was promised to us verbally never was on paper. It's not like we could ever really make a... Well, we still made a stink. But we couldn't legally make a stink about it because this was all just, you know, verbal stuff, and they could just say, you know, we didn't understand, or
we took them at their word. And the thing about business and stuff is there's all very good intentions when somebody gives you a word and says, hey, you're going to be in this promotion, but all sorts of factors can change between them starting a promotion and actually doing one and following through with it.
Yeah, it definitely does suck though, because our producer was really cool, and I would love to work with him again.
I mean, not even just our producer. I mean, most everyone we talked to.
Yeah,
everybody we had direct contact with was great to work with, and they supported the game, and they absolutely loved it, and they loved what we were doing. Yeah, we got in trouble a couple times with the we found a loophole in Microsoft, but I mean, we didn't even say that. So. Yeah.
it was a real little roller coaster ride with Microsoft, and definitely had highs and lows. Yeah, maybe a regime change. You know, I don't know. Like, shit changes so much at Microsoft. Like,
oh yeah, dude, I forgot to tell you, our Sony lady left.
Oh really?
She's been promoted. New person now.
Huh.
Yeah, so whatever.
Yeah, there's like a high turnover rate. Like, while we were there, we had 2 or 3 different people that we were originally talking to, like I don't know what they call the money people.
Yeah, the business side.
Yeah, and like I heard,
like crazy.
It's like when we initially went in and they were saying no, essentially, because they thought the game looked like a Flash game and whatever else. It was this guy had just come into power or whatever there, and he was the high up, and he was going to change the way people, you know, kind of viewed. Like, everybody who comes in and takes over has their little campaign that they're going for, and it's like a lot of things like 3D games are in, 2D games are out, like that sort of thing. And
it honestly seems like they go in with this little project so they get noticed by higher ups, so they get promoted. So their project, they may get the time to actually finish it to completion, or they may get promoted before they finish it, and then that's when shit gets dropped in the middle of stuff, and that's when stuff gets kind of messed up.
It'd be nice to keep our options open, and with Microsoft, it's usually like us or nobody else.
This also noticeably influenced the actions of Tommy while developing Forever. He was very adamant on not wanting to rush the game due to the stress that time crunch can have on a team. The movie is fairly interesting, and while I don't recommend watching it more than one time, it definitely sweetened my opinions on both men during my time of making this video. Make of that statement what you will. Meat Boy related things in The Binding of Isaac. This is simply referring to the fact that in the Binding of Isaac franchise, there are multiple items that reference Meat Boy. Seeing as how Edmund created both Super Meat Boy and Isaac, it would only make sense for him to sprinkle in little references here and there. Edmund's creations are extremely synonymous with him, as many of his titles share naming motifs or direct references to each other. One of the biggest references is baked into the game as a cutscene where you unlock the Dr. Fetus item. Of course, you know that has to do with Meat Boy immediately, but the cutscene goes even further to cement the reference, as the classic intro jingle for the chapters in Super Meat Boy are thrown into the score. Funnily enough, this exact rendition of the jingle is reused in Ridiculon's rendition of the soundtrack in Super Meat Boy's next-gen ports. For now, here's a full rundown of every single Meat Boy reference in The Binding of Isaac. The one that everyone jumps to is the cube of meat and ball of bandages. These are essentially the same item, only differing cosmetically. With them, you can create your own versions of Meat Boy and Bandage Girl drawn in the Isaac style. This item circles around Isaac and deals damage to anything that gets close to him. This is also one of the only items in the game that can be collected multiple times and upgraded in a sense. To get this item in the first place, you have to fight and defeat one of the Harbinger bosses, Famine, Pestilence, War, and Death. The item can be collected up to 4 times, meaning you have to fight the Harbinger bosses 4 times in a playthrough to get the item up to its full potential.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
This is one of the more infamous items, since the sheer amount of RNG in Isaac means that your luck has to be godlike for this to happen in any one playthrough. If you manage to pull it off, level 2 makes the item's hitbox slightly bigger, as well as giving it a little Meat Boy face. It also fires a projectile in the direction Isaac shoots. Level 3 will make the Meat Boy break away from Isaac and run on its own, gunning straight for enemies and damaging them. Level 4 is level 3, but Meat Boy is bigger and much more powerful. Also worth mentioning is the Potato Peeler active item, which when activated takes away one of Isaac's red hearts, but gives him a cube of meat item. If you're willing to part with 4 of your hearts, you can very easily get Meat Boy to level 4. The second biggest reference is the boss named C.H.A.D. It's a direct reference to the second boss of Super Meat Boy, also named C.H.A.D, on top of looking nearly identical. He's a reskin of the Chub boss with identical AI, except he spawns suckers instead of chargers, and he gets smaller and faster, scaling to his draining health. Once defeated, C.H.A.D will drop the item Little C.H.A.D. The tooltip on the item is Gives Kisses, which is a direct reference to his behavior in the cutscene following his boss battle in Super Meat Boy. As the item describes, Little C.H.A.D will give Isaac a kiss every 3 rooms, dropping a half heart for him to pick up. I'll briefly go through the rest of the items as they don't require much fanfare. The Doctor's Remote being a reference to Dr. Fetus's iconic remote from the games. An active item with a 2-room charge. When activated, it pulls up a crosshair that can be controlled by Isaac. After 1.5-ish seconds, a missile will drop to deal damage and destroy obstacles. SMB Superfan. This one kinda makes me smile. Picking it up gives you the appearance of Meat Boy, awarding you full health and all stats up. In Repentance, picking up this item as the keeper gives you the appearance of Tofu Boy. Speaking of which, Super Tofu Boy is the now infamous meme within the Meat Boy fanbase and games. This was PETA's attempt to parody popular video games by creating pro-vegan versions of them, overly exaggerating parts about eating meat and giving money to the meat industry. More games like this exist, such as Cooking Mama, Mama Kills Animals, in which the titular character does precisely what the game tells you she does. There's also new Super Chick Sisters following 2 chicks that fill the roles of Mario and Luigi because they got fat off of Mickey D's. Fun fact about this game, I actually played this game when I was younger and I enjoyed it a ton, not knowing that it was a PETA game. And of course, you already know about the best one of them all, Super Tofu Boy. This was created to throw shade in the direction of Edmund for daring to create a character with the word meat in it, as well as interesting promotional choices centering around meat. The story stapled onto it is quite hilarious. Meat Boy seriously gets cucked by the glowing Tofu Boy, whom Bandage Girl takes a liking to because he's all natural and not pumped full of hormones. As a result, Meat Boy kidnaps Bandage Girl and Tofu has to go save her. The game has the basic running and jumping along with collecting bandages and reaching Bandage Girl at the end of the level. All throughout you run through bloody slaughterhouses, a bloody McDonald's, and a bloody bacon factory. In case you forgot, animals have blood too, ya bloodthirsty animals. Midway through, Dr. Fetus pops up and says that it was he that pumped Meat Boy full of the hormones so that the ugly side effects of his meatiness would drive Bandage Girl away. That's what he says verbatim. After the final level, you're directed to PETA's website, where you can pledge to be vegan, an absolute masterclass of the genre, awakening the sleeping vegan within us all. I'm not kidding, but I actually had a better time with this game than I did with Super Meat Boy Forever. The controls, while janky and slippery to no end, were still somewhat fun to get a grasp on and breeze through the levels with Tofu Boy's super duper speed. The art style is nothing short of hilarious, and seeing the way they remixed all the characters, from making Bandage Girl into a bimbo with dog ears to Dr. Fetus making me crack up every single time I look at him from how silly he looks, then Tofu Boy's pristine look compared to the rest of them. The story, while ridiculous as it can be, is just too funny to not laugh at, and very well captures the dumb humor Meat Boy is known for, with a twist of Mary Sue OC action thrown into there. The people behind this were clearly inspired and did a ton of remixing to the franchise, which is more than I can say for the latest entry. The big kicker here is that Edmund saw this and promptly replied with a public statement saying that Meat Boy isn't actually made of meat, but a regular human boy without skin. More on this plot point deeper in the iceberg. As a jab right back at PETA, Edmund added Tofu Boy into the game on the Steam version shortly after the game's release. You can play as him by typing the word pedophile at the character select screen, though you have to be quick about it, typing the word without errors and in around 5 seconds. If you do this correctly, you'll be prompted to push the buttons! And another fun fact I want to throw in here is that the sound effect was taken straight from the amazing 90s style commercial made by James Id. Due to Tofu Boy's major iron deficiency, he's the worst character in the game. His jump height and speed are the worst across all playable characters, and more than half of the game is impossible while playing as him. Funnily enough though, any level you beat as Tofu Boy will be given an A+ ranking automatically. He also makes a reappearance in Super Meat Boy Forever, serving as the one character who plays differently from the rest of the skins you get in the game. He's much slower and will occasionally come to a dead halt to take a break, making him dangerous and unreliable to play with. At least they got that part right. They also brought back his ability to automatically grant A+, but they are essentially useless now, since the newly introduced S rank, which requires a deathless run of a level, makes it all but obsolete. Much like Tofu Boy himself. Poor guy. Super Meat Boy Meat Ninja pop-ups. In the original Super Meat Boy, there's a rare chance of seeing a message from Meat Ninja when getting an A+ rank on a level. Most of Meat Ninja's lines are references to other games. For example, I Smell Wet Fur is a reference to Spelunky, while In the Year 20X is a reference to Mega Man 2's intro. However, the biggest reference in the Meat Boy Ninja pop-ups is to the Reptile fight in the original Mortal Kombat. In that game, Reptile would pop up on rare occasions and give esoteric hints on how to fight him. One of the messages from Meat Ninja is even an exact hint from Reptile. Look to La Luna. While the Meet Me at 100 line, besides being a hint on how to unlock Meat Ninja, is probably a reference to the I will meet you in Goro's lair hint for all the secret characters in Mortal Kombat 2. Oh, Lil Slugger. During development on Super Meat Boy, Lil Slugger's design went through various changes. Although many of these designs were shown in the art book for Super Meat Boy's Ultra Edition, the most prominent beta design for Lil Slugger is one featuring spindly spider legs. This first appearance of Spider Slugger was in the December 2009 issue of Nintendo Power. According to Edmund in a post called The Cutting Room Floor, which I just went over, the artwork in Nintendo Power wasn't an in-game screen cap, but an early mock-up he had created. Bear in mind, Super Meat Boy was still in early development in December 2009. In that same post, Edmund also showed walking animations for the spider version of Lil Slugger, and based on Edmund describing the animation as a horrible walk cycle, it's safe to say he wasn't satisfied with how this design looked in movement. However, what's interesting is that Spider Slugger got far enough into development for Edmund to have worked on his stage. Thanks to the Cutting Room Floor, we know that an early version of the Lil Slugger stage is still in the Super Meat Boy files. This version, in addition to featuring the stage on fire like in the Nintendo Power mockup, also appears to be designed with Spider Slugger in mind. I like to think this version of Lil Slugger lives on in some sort of way, since it bears a striking resemblance to Choo Choo Charles. 726% meaning. In Super Meat Boy Forever, the progression of a save file does not stop at a mere 100%. It goes as far as 726%. And that may seem daunting until you realize that this is reached simply through unlocking all of the skins. Unlocking the final one will grant you the coveted 726%. On the path of collecting all the skins, you must S-rank both the Light World and the Dark World in their entirety in any given seed, as 2 of the characters are contingent upon it. You also have to complete all of the cursed warp zones and collect 90 pacifiers, the primary collectible standing in place of bandages. This isn't possible in one playthrough, so you are required to use the New Game Plus feature to give you a fresh batch of levels to collect more. There are other miscellaneous things you have to do for some of the other characters, on top of one of the characters being entirely RNG in terms of his unlock method. You can easily find out how to unlock all of them, and granted you have the time and patience to do it, you too can have a big number on your save file. Better yet, you can be given a role on the Team Meat Discord if you do this while playing the entire game with your feet. If that is what you want to spend your free time on, be my guest. The actual meaning of the number, 726, is the date that Tommy's child was born, July 26th. Aww. 2014 Mewgenics. This refers to the old meat version of Mewgenics that was first announced in 2013. Following the success of Super Meat Boy, it was very apparent that Edmund did not want the fate of becoming a one-hit wonder. In interviews and blog posts at the time, Edmund made it clear that Meat Boy 2 wasn't happening, as he didn't want to taint the original and also didn't want to be known as just the Meat Boy guy.
After all of the good feedback you received from your fans, are you still saying no to a sequel to Super Meat Boy?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the fans are going to appreciate it so much more. I'm trying to think, like, it's so uncommon for a game not to have. Okay, here's an idea, like ICO or ICO or whatever you want to call it. Like, if they made a sequel to that, you know, these people aren't making sequels, even though the games are kind of tied together. Like, Shadow of the Colossus maybe has something to do with the first game, but it's not the same game at all. So that game's like stuck in time permanently. It's always going to be that, and it's never going to be tainted by anything else. And I think both me and Tommy right now, and you know, in the foreseeable future, I don't think we have the skills to top Super Meat Boy and bring anything new to the table at all. Mm-hmm. Like, in order to make a sequel to Super Meat Boy, we'd have to have shitloads of new mechanics and stuff like that. And like, if you look at Nintendo, like with Zelda, with each sequel is usually a new huge mechanic that changes everything, and it's never, they've got the basic structure, but with Meat Boy, I just, there's nothing there from idea-wise. Like, it's tapped out, and I don't want to fuck up what we did. You know, like, I don't want to taint, you know, what if it's not as good, and, you know, I just don't want to go there. So I think we're going to stay away from that. And also, I think we love the game, but we're a bit sick of
a little bit
the
sick
Meat Boy
of it,
stuff.
for sure.
There's only so much. Like, maybe 5 years from now, break out Meat Boy and play it again and really appreciate it again. But right now, it's just like been in our face for so long, and
it's time for something new.
So instead of following up Super Meat Boy with Super Meat Boy 2, Old Meat began working on Mewgenics, a cat breeding sim. Edmund described Mewgenics as a cross between The Sims and Pokemon with a sprinkling of Animal Crossing and a dash of Tamagotchi. Edmund also posted Mewgenics updates in the Team Meat blog and a separate Mewgenics development blog. However, Mewgenics would eventually be put on hold in 2014 so that Team Meat could focus on Super Meat Boy Forever. Edmund claimed that the game needed to be overhauled completely and that they would try again after Forever's release. But don't worry, Team Meat will get back around to Mewgenics. Forever's development shouldn't be too long, and we'll end up with a fun spin-off to hold us off between a larger project, right? Okay, so Forever's development didn't pan out as expected, and Edmund would eventually leave Team Meat, taking Mewgenics with him. And while Mewgenics development is finally back in full swing, the new version of the project looks vastly different from the original 2014 version. Also, with Edmund no longer being a part of Team Meat, the Team Meat logo is now censored on his upload of the Mewgenics teaser. The game's original release date of 2014 is also censored, but you can still find uploads of the original teaser with the logo intact. Super Meat Boy Handheld is a mobile game created by Old Meat back in 2011. It was created as an April Fool's joke when the App Store took down one of Tommy's older games, Zits and Giggles. He's been seen numerous times voicing his disdain towards the mobile game market, even going as far as calling mobile games the Tiger handheld games of the modern generation.
But I was going to do a talk about, like, how you're an independent developer and you're basically allowed to do whatever you want to do, and I was going to relate that to how we do press for Super Meat Boy and everything, but I decided to take that idea and do something totally different because I can. So what I want to talk about is the iPhone App Store. If any of you know me, some of you do, you know I absolutely fucking hate the iPhone App Store. I think it's awful, I think it's horrible. So about 5 months ago I started an experiment. And this experiment was to basically prove that the App Store is kind of shit for most things. My theory about the App Store is basically that it is the Tiger handheld game of this generation. And the reason I say this, I mean, back when I was small, I had, I have them written down here, I had Mega Man 2, I had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I had Mortal Kombat, but I had all of these, and I was a fan of every one of these games. But they were horrible, they were bad, they didn't control well, they didn't look good, they were LED crap. And I kind of compare the App Store to that because, I mean, honestly, who has beaten Mega Man 2 on the iPhone? Anybody? No. Anybody beaten Sonic? Anybody played all the way through Sonic on the iPhone? No. And see, and then yesterday, what came out? Street Fighter 4? And I know Greg was saying it's really good or whatever, but you can't play Street Fighter. He was out there. He was like, "Oh, it's really good. You're gonna love it." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. It's a fucking touchscreen. You can't play Street Fighter 4 on a touchscreen. Just like the Tiger handheld, you cannot experience Street Fighter on a Tiger handheld. You can't experience any of these games." So what I did, I had a game that I did with Adam called Zits and Giggles, which was also another joke game. Oh God, it's so good though. Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful game. And so I put it up there, it wasn't selling, so I decided, well, fuck it, I'll put it up to $15. The day I put it up to $15, 3 people bought it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna put it up to $50. 4 people bought it at $50. Then I go, okay, I'm going to $150, and every time someone buys it, I'm going to raise the price tier. It is at $350 now. But that's not the best part. I stopped looking at it. I stopped paying attention to it after a while. And I checked it on Valentine's Day. 14 people bought it at $299. So my conclusion to all of this is the people that you're selling games to on the App Store, they're not necessarily gamers. There are some games that work very, very well on the App Store. But I think for the most part, when you have stuff like Street Fighter and Assassin's Creed, they are a way to sell a brand, just like the Tiger handhelds were.
As you can see from the game's screenshots, it was made out to be just that, a Tiger handheld game with an extremely simple left-right jump control scheme. When inquired about it on the Team Meat Discord, Tommy conceded that he no longer has the game. It was thought to be lost media, but extremely recently, in March of 2022, the game was found again, as someone still had it downloaded on their mobile device and came forward with the game still intact. The game can be downloaded and played now, but besides the elusivity factor that used to exist, the game is nothing much to write home about now. Kids React video. On Tommy's YouTube channel, there's a rather strange video in which he reacts to a video in the Fine Brothers video series fittingly titled React. The series is mainly made up of people from different age groups reacting to whatever is put in front of them. In this particular video, kids ranging from elementary school age to early teens react to the game of Super Meat Boy. Tommy's reaction to it doesn't really add a whole lot unless you want a goofball in the corner looking at the screen like this. He would occasionally come in with a comment of the happenings within the game, and a lot of the times making comments on how terribly they're playing the game. Early on, he makes it a point to call out the abysmal frame rate, and it seems like that's a result of using speed hacks to slow the game down, most likely to make it easier for the kids to play. It's tough to tell, but it would make some sense unless it's just a shitty computer like Tommy suggests. Overall, it's a harmless video, but he doesn't do much to the tune of adding on to the experience or riffing off of what the kids are saying to shed light on the development process. The one thing I'll say is that Tommy calls out the giant-ass calculator watch one of them is wearing, and I gotta say, that is pretty cool. I want one. Dr. Fetus's Twitter. The Dr. Fetus Twitter account was a fun thing that Team Meat did to promote Super Meat Boy. Acting in character as Dr. Fetus, the account would post about a variety of topics from current, at the time, events, to movies, to TV shows. Dr. Fetus would also talk down to Meat Boy and Team Meat as a whole. A good example is when Dr. Fetus celebrated Peter releasing Tofu Boy. There was also a selection on the Team Meat blog showing updates from the Dr. Fetus Twitter. Unfortunately, there was a long gap in posts from Dr. Fetus between 2011 and 2017 due to Forever's developmental limbo, but Dr. Fetus did return in time for Forever, claiming that he found his password on a $1,000 bill that he didn't even know he lost. While I'm not sure whether Edmund or Tommy ran the original Dr. Fetus account, we can confirm that Tommy ran the Dr. Fetus account in 2017. IndiePogo is a fighting game. Meat Boy is in it. The most notable thing about the game is an auto-jumping mechanic that does exactly what it sounds like. This is a mechanic inspired by the mobile game Slambots, which itself was inspired by Doodle Jump, in which you keep on jumping. The action never stops and it's a fun experience all around. It went from fun to ultra fun when they added in Meat Boy. He fits in like a glove, and it was a pleasant surprise to see a Meat Boy crossover in the modern day, as well as seeing him actually look cool. He draws inspiration from the other characters in the Meat Boy pantheon and sports a few of his own brand new moves. The game is fairly well made, and I suggest you check it out and support the people behind it. They incorporated my boy very well. Mad Dex and other ripoffs. Mad Dex is a Super Meat Boy knockoff that was released on mobile devices in 2016. While far from the first Meat Boy clone, other Meat Boy ripoffs at least tried half-heartedly to deviate from Meat Boy. Mad Dex, on the other hand, is as blatant as it gets, literally being Meat Boy in a trucker hat, so basically on par with most of the roster in Forever. Dex even leaves a blood trail like Meat Boy, so they didn't even change him into tofu or cheese to make it a little more original. The developers for Mad Dex also got some real mileage out of it apparently, even releasing Mad Dex 2 and Mad Dex Arenas, which gives Trucker Meat Boy a gun. While Mad Dex 1 and 2 aren't available on iOS, they are on the Google Play Store. Android gangers stay winning. It's very safe to assume that Team Meat took notice and weren't keen on such a blatant clone being on the App Store. Mad Dex Arenas is still on iOS though, for some reason. Probably because the icon has a legally distinct character. Don't worry though, cause the ever so beloved trucker hat Meat Boy still appears in Arenas.
Jeez, there's a lot of spaces when you get in early. Jeez, there's a lot of donuts when you get in early. Hot coffee?
Hot Coffee is an unlockable cutscene in Flash Meat Boy. After finishing the game with all the bandages in the game, players are shown a scene of Meat Boy and Bandage Girl doing it. The name, Hot Coffee, as well as the actual scene are both clear references to the infamous Hot Coffee minigame found in the code of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. The most heartbreaking part about this entry is to see the cutscene you have to look it up on YouTube or play the original Flash version, as the Basement Collection has the cutscene censored in place of a wall of text to the dismay of Edmund and many others, including me. Oh. I Wanna Kill the Meat Boy is a fan game released in 2017 by Marsavek, a degenerate you would not want to be in the same room as. The gameplay features the kid from I Wanna Be the Guy as the playable character, but has bosses and levels from Super Meat Boy. It looks like a decent little fan game, but it isn't all too crazy considering the kid is already playable in Super Meat Boy. And that's about it. I'm not about to go into a whole documentary about a Hot Topic mashup shirt-looking game made by a brony who gets off to poo, but I regret to say that the game kinda looks fun, and the level design is on point for Meat Boy. I could easily see these levels in an expansion pack or something. Just keep all that stuff about the creator in mind when playing the game though. Don't worry, we'll get into him later. Tommy wants a Super Meat Boy cartoon. Multiple times, way too many times for comfort, Tommy Urfanis has expressed his interest, nay desire, to make a Meat Boy cartoon. He even has gone as far as to mention that the cutscenes in Super Meat Boy Forever are to serve as the pilot for the series. As a guy who writes novels, I've got loads to say about this entry alone. The story within the new Meat games is confusing at best and absolutely broken at worst. Based on what you may know about Tommy, just from the iceberg alone, he seems quite passionate about turning Meat Boy into a multimedia empire. In fact, he's going all in with the idea of a Meat Boy cartoon. He hopes that the pilot is good enough to attract the eyes of Adult Swim or Netflix, and a full series can be made. He even plans to have voice acting. Not gonna lie, if they have auditions for that, I think I would be a shoo-in for Meat Boy. He's even got an outline for the first episode. Nugget finds a butterfly and Bandage Girl finds that she's scared of butterflies. Alright, I mean, anything can work in the hands of the right people. I'm sure they can find a way to make it entertaining. Well, what's the B plot? Dr. Fetus tries to become an influencer. Okay, to move to the next thing. There exists a case of vandalism on the Super Meat Boy wiki that would later become dubbed as the Baby Meat Boy Hoax. Although the vandalism wasn't archived, the content of the page can be assumed thanks to discussion about it in the Team Meat Discord. In 2021, somebody made a page on the Super Meat Boy wiki for Baby Meat Boy, who was supposedly a super duper secret unlockable character in Super Meat Boy Forever. According to the page, the way to unlock Baby Meat Boy was to have 3 save files in Super Meat Boy Forever that have been completed to 726%. However, this would ultimately be proven fake by Twitch user Half Dead. The Baby Meat Boy hoax appeared to be inspired by other video game hoaxes, especially the L is Real hoax from Mario 64. All of these hoaxes are notorious for having absurdly large, time-consuming requirements to meet, which Baby Meat Boy also followed. Baby Meat Boy is also probably referring to Nugget. The guy who made the hoax probably didn't know her name, but figured that having the character you save be the final unlockable character would be a convincing secret. Meat Boy cameos in other games. The indie community was quite homey back in the day, as a lot of indie developers were in very close touch with each other. Meat Boy was no exception, as he was thrown into loads of other games, ranging from being a playable character to a small Easter egg in the background. Some of his most iconic appearances include the background of multiple Bit Trip games, with Dr. Fetus even being a playable character in Runner 2. He also appeared in The Binding of Isaac, as I previously discussed, as an item and in multiple points throughout the game. He appeared as a playable character in Spelunky, and the whole Meat Boy cast appears in WarioWare DIY, an entry I'll get into much later down the line. One of his biggest references is a tasteful addition in a AAA title, Watch Dogs Legion, where a mock-up of Level 1-1 is constructed on the wall with paint, with a trail of what I assume is actual blood following Meat Boy. He's still making some cameos today, being included as a playable character in the fighting game IndiePogo that I just brought up. Overall, New Meat isn't too keen on shilling out Meat Boy, unless of course they do it in the form of a G Fuel or plushie partnership, but if you're looking for the red dude in your favorite indie game these days, don't push your luck. Meat Boy and Nintendo Power. Back when Super Meat Boy was still in development for WiiWare, Nintendo Power published 2 interviews with Team Meat. These interviews appeared in the July and November 2009 issues of Nintendo Power. Edmund would also post about the interview on the Meat Boy development blog, saying that being in Nintendo Power was a pipe dream come true. Both are really cool reads, and the pictures shown feature early elements of the game like Spider Slugger, and luckily both of these issues of Nintendo Power are available to read on the Internet Archive. Smash 4 mod. This one's pretty straightforward and refers to a mod for Smash 4 by Game Banana user Dreamcaster. The mod replaces Jigglypuff with Meat Boy and is pretty dope. For some reason though, the trailer for this mod is unavailable, but there's some gameplay videos with it on YouTube. On the previous Iceberg, I erroneously thought that this image was the main culprit, but it happens that it's just a cool edit. I'm still including it here though because it goes very hard. Feel free to screenshot. What happened to John McEntee? It's no secret that the original programmer for Flash Meat Boy, John McEntee, has become an elusive figure over the years. His online footprint has been incredibly sparse, with even his Newgrounds page not seeing much activity. What's even more bizarre is that based on early press releases for Super Meat Boy, back when the game was first announced for WiiWare, John McEntee was indeed going to work on Super Meat Boy in some form. This was also shown in the first version of the Super Meat Boy website, with Big John McEntee being credited alongside Edmund. Moreover, Edmund also mentioned John being involved in 2 posts on his Newgrounds account. So that ultimately begs the question, what happened to John? In an interview with Team Meat from November 2009, almost a year after the press release, Edmund would mention John when asked about the origins of Meat Boy. When mentioning having worked with John, Edmund also mentioned that John wasn't developing games anymore and that Meat Boy was his first and only game.
Now, did you guys do Meat Boy together, or was that just Edmund?
It was me and John McEntee.
Okay.
I work with a lot of different programmers on different Flash games. Mm-hmm. And Meat Boy was the only game I worked on with John. John's not actually working on games anymore. That was his kind of one and only game.
So we know why John wasn't involved in Super Meat Boy, but where is he now? In the Team Meat Discord, Tommy said that John may be teaching English in Japan, which is pretty effing cool. Tommy also mentioned that John didn't really want to be a game developer. Overall, it seems like game development was a one-time thing for John. Xbox Live Arcade Extra Bandage. Exclusively in the Xbox 360 version of the game, there's an extra bandage placed in the 12th level of Cotton Alley Dark. It's a little easy to miss, and I definitely missed it when I was playing this game back then, seeing as how everything is all pink. Even the name of the level is pink.
I saw it! It's big, scary, and pink!
But it's possible to grab it, and you're able to net yourself a 107% on your game save file. Middle Finger Spectrogram. The Middle Finger Spectrogram is an Easter egg in Super Meat Boy Forever. Power Up Audio, the team that did the sound design on Forever, made a post showing something they implemented in the Destroy Lil Slugger Warp Zone minigame. As it turns out, Dr. Fetus's gibberish dialogue when you beat the minigame showed an image when viewed on a spectrogram. The picture depicts a middle finger, a great Easter egg and not even remotely out of place. Jodan Fehr is the sound designer on Super Meat Boy and the original Binding of Isaac. Remember all those gnarly squishes and splats in Super Meat Boy? Jordan's the guy behind them. He's also done sound work on games like Hotline Miami and even Donkey Kong Country Returns. Pretty sick portfolio overall. Jodan didn't return for Super Meat Boy Forever, and as mentioned, his job was undertaken by Power Up Audio, who provided sound effects for plenty of other new and notable indie games such as Celeste, Crypt of the Necrodancer, Darkest Dungeon 1 and 2, and Tunic. Their work in those games and Super Meat Boy Forever are passable, but nothing can quite top the punchy, impactful sounds Jodan made for the original game, with their sounds being much more generic and almost restrained. The Badlands. This refers to a universe of games Edmund created along with Calder Bradford. It's a completely different world from anything else Edmund made, and it's likely in the Iceberg because Edmund once stated in a Tapeworm stream that if he had kept the Meat Boy IP, he would have made the Badlands canon to Meat Boy. The game takes place in a continent called Golgotha. It's home to many creatures. The Serious Peashy, the Weltling, the Dumpling, and the Dimkin are amongst them. Serious Peashy is a major game in the series, taking multiple years and revisions to be made. It began in late December 2002 and was finally released in January 2007. When development first began, Edmund was working with Tom Fulp, however he went to go work on Alien Hominid. After Tom left, Edmund started working with Calder, who was a fan of his work, and made Curious Weltling and Clubby the Seal while developing Gish, which also takes place in this universe and features a few of the characters such as Serious Peashy, Dumpling, Incubus Peashy, Weltling, and Bloatling. Around 2004, Edmund decided to redraw the entire game. In 2005, Calder and Edmund opened up the Diverge Creations website, the home of the Badlands games. As development progressed, Edmund became less and less interested. If you go on his Twitter, he said before that he didn't even want to release the game. It's a platformer with a twist. Because it took so long, there's a lot of unused content and cut ideas, multiple worlds, a punch attack, etc. The game was even going to be made into multiple chapters, but only one exists out there. After Series Peachy, Edmund and Calder Bradford's friendship started to wane as they began having arguments over design. They made one last game together called Host, an online multiplayer flash game. This is the game that inspired the enemy of the same name in the Isaac franchise. The Badlands is an interesting look at something that could have gone a little further, but unfortunately it's lost to time now. It's a more unrestricted look at Edmund, and if you're looking for a more grotesque set of games from the man, give these a shot. You shan't be disappointed. Scrapped cutscenes for Unlockables. Originally, instead of featuring the retro-styled intro cutscenes for unlockable characters, Super Meat Boy was going to have full-fledged cutscenes for Unlockables. However, Edmund didn't get far with the creation of the cutscenes for Unlockables. In the same blog post featuring the early Lil Slugger designs, Edmund also showed the only completed character cutscene for Tim from Braid. Something really cool about this cutscene is that it's in an early art style, which Edmund expressed distaste for in the blog post. Edmund also stated that the full cutscenes for unlockable characters were scrapped because they would have been too much work for him. SuperMeatBoy.com forums. This refers to the forums on the website SuperMeatBoy.com, obviously. But a lot of them veered into weird territory. Some of the most interesting entries include 90 youths killed in Norway, and a thread in which someone speaks about the prospect of parents sending their undisciplined children away to torture camps? Totally not out of place on the forums about a silly meat character. The forums can't be read now since SuperMeatBoy.com is just one big advertisement for Super Meat Boy forever, but the archived forums still do exist. Take a peek into the description and check them out. Old merch stores. This is talking about the old Team Meat store that existed from 2009 to 2015. Originally, the store was run from Edmund's Etsy and featured handmade merch made by his girlfriend, Danielle, and her mom. Stuff like stickers, plushies, and resin figures. This is also where stuff like the Super Meat Boy comic were sold. Later on, merch would begin to be sold through Shangasm, a shop ran by Tommy and his wife Shannon in 2016. Interesting thing about this shop is that it had merchandise for the 2014 version of Super Meat Boy Forever. Due to how limited many of these items are, they only appear for sale online infrequently and for high prices. What the fuck? 3DS version. In February 2011, Team Meat announced that they received approval to develop 3DS games, leading to many fans asking about the possibility of a Super Meat Boy 3DS port. At first, Team Meat seemed to be open to the idea until July of the same year when Team Meat announced that they had no plans to release it on 3DS, as Team Meat had approval to develop on 3DS but no dev kits. Years later, in May 2016, the possibility of a 3DS version would be teased again with the release of the Wii U version. Bitworks, the company responsible for porting Super Meat Boy, made a press release hinting at the possibility of a 3DS port. However, in 2017, Team Meat would finally outright say that a 3DS port wasn't happening. Me personally, I think this would have kicked some ass. The controls can easily be replicated with the 3DS control stick and buttons, and the touchscreen can be used for maybe looking at the map and scrolling between the levels if you miss something, or have the A+ times and bandage marker down there. Team Meat messing it up again, like they do all the time. Team Meat's unlisted videos. Although there are some videos unlisted on New Meat's YouTube channel, that's probably not what this entry is talking about. Instead, it's likely referring to the many unlisted videos no longer on the channels of old Meat members, Edmund and Tommy. Although there are some things in their online footprint that have been lost to time, many of these videos are still available thanks to the Super Meat Boy Lost Levels channel. Super Meat Boy and Super Meat Boy Forever continuity issues. So remember how I was talking about the story in these new games being utterly broken? Well, here you go. Despite being a self-proclaimed sequel to Super Meat Boy Forever has a lot of continuity issues with the previous story and world. One of the biggest changes is the retconning of Dr. Fetus being set up to be Meat Boy and Bandage Girl's child, which was a deliberate choice by Edmund as a means to expand upon the dynamic of the characters. This was scrapped in favor of Nugget, Meat Boy and Bandage Girl's newborn daughter, heavily inspired by Tommy's own child that was born roughly around the time of this game's release. On top of that, there are a few issues with the story progression, as you visit the forest and hospital again, or if you want to be extremely fair, zones that are identical to the forest and hospital but with different names. This would all make a tad bit more sense as the original inception of Forever was meant to be a retelling of the original game's story, but this is a sequel. The original game's events are still there. This was enough to get a response out of Edmund, who was shocked at the new beats in the story as they disregard the things that he set up. It could have been a great idea to dive into, but instead, we get what we got in the final product. A Voyeur for September is a 2014 ARG by Old Meat. On August 18th, 2014, Team Meat released a trailer for a live-action stealth game called A Voyeur for September. The trailer was fairly bizarre, cutting between black and white footage and shots of somebody peering into a house. In addition to linking to a website for the game, which only featured a logo and the trailer, Edmund would confirm on his blog that the game would be shown at PAX of that year. However, it turned out to be a gag, as Team Meat would go on to announce Super Meat Boy Forever, while Edmund confirmed that A Voyeur for September was an anagram for Super Meat Boy Forever. Very clever.
Blog! It's Goblin spelled backwards!
Facebook teaser removal. This refers to a goofy situation involving an ad for Super Meat Boy Forever. On December 21st, 2018, Team Meat posted that Facebook had rejected an ad for Super Meat Boy Forever using this artwork. They also stated, "I thought I was the only one that got a raging boner thinking about Super Meat Boy Forever, but I guess not." The Team Meat Twitter went on to make several posts making fun of the situation, including a Facebook-friendly version of the art. Dr. Fetus shakes his ass! Dr. Fetus shakes his fist. Another comical example of censorship in the Meat Boy circle. In the Nintendo trailer for Super Meat Boy Forever, Dr. Fetus has been made to shake his fist instead of flip the middle finger, like he's supposed to do every single time. This is Nintendo's attempt at censorship, as they are a company known for their family-friendly image. In a few cases, Dr. Fetus was also renamed to Dr. F. It rings in the same pitch as the Facebook censorship, but I will say that Dr. Fetus attempting to throw hands with God is quite funny. Pocket Meat is a decreation of the original Super Meat Boy. I have always been extremely interested in decreations of games, as it's an interesting way to see what people can do in terms of downgrading the game to not really make it worse, but translate it to match the meta of the time. Pocket Meat does this pretty well and actually does a good job of translating the playstyle of the game. It was created by user BomberDev and can be downloaded and played on any Game Boy Advance emulator. It's extremely short, being only 4 levels long, but the fact that it's there and someone was inventive enough and dedicated enough to downscale the game in this way is pretty freaking cool. Another cool one that I'm going to throw in there is Dead Flesh Boy, made for the ZX Spectrum by Jonathan Caldwell.
Oops. Oops.
Play that one too, if you can. Hey. Whoa. CheeseMan is a Meat Boy knockoff on iOS and Android that predates Mad Dex by years, coming out around 2011. The description reads, CheeseMan is a 2D platformer where you play with that little piece of cheese called CheeseMan on iOS and Android. CheeseMan's quest to save the Cheese Land from the evil Professor Mousky with the help of Cheesette, a tough cheese girl who doesn't need a plumber to save her. The creativity is oozing out of this one. It received extremely poor reviews and even warranted an article from Kotaku, who mainly put the game down for trying to include tight controls on a platformer where it wasn't supported. The game itself is exactly what you think it is, and weirdest of all is that the Meat Boy characters, they just show up in the game. Like not like parodied or remixed like in Tofu Boy, but they just show up just in their normal forms. Overall, it's just a cheap knockoff, and the best part is the piece of music that goes along with it. Team Meat teased a Metroidvania. This refers to a Team Meat response to a fan on Twitter. After the Team Meat Twitter posted about Metroid Samus Returns, a fan commented how cool it would be if Team Meat made a Metroidvania. In response, Team Meat stated, "I think you'll be happy in a few years. I've brainstormed a couple of ideas for making a Metroidvania Dr. Fetus game in the past, and I very well might make a video about my idea." But with Tommy heading up the franchise, it's safe to say he's going to throw a wrench into the works with his tendency to overcompensate and overblow rather simple ideas. Super Meat Boy Forever could have been a simple autorunner spin-off that had a few more aspects to differentiate it from the rest. But instead, he took an idea meant for a mobile platform and scaled it up to a $20 price tag, believing that well-animated cutscenes would increase the intrinsic value of the game. That did not end up happening at all. I can only hope that Tommy has some remotely good ideas up there to make it fun, if not a Meat Boy game. But keep in mind that we already saw what happens when you put Tommy in charge. Edmund wanted Tofu Boy to happen. This refers to something said by Edmund in the Super Meat Boy vs. PETA blog post made in December 2009. Edmund made no secret about how thrilled he was to see Tofu Boy, with both him and Tommy regularly laughing about it in interviews.
But those were like the only like two lows. I mean, the crazy high was PETA.
Yeah.
That was an awesome high.
However, in the blog post, Edmund revealed that this was something that he wanted to happen since Flash Meat Boy. He revealed that a year beforehand, he had made fake accounts on PETA's forum about Flash Meat Boy in hopes that PETA would respond. The post reads, and I quote, "So, as many of you know, the famed PETA organization took time out of their schedule to make a parody of Super Meat Boy, Super Tofu Boy. Honestly, this is a major high point for me personally. Putting all my cards on the table right now, I actually made fake usernames in PETA's forum, pushing the game at them in hopes something like this would happen, but gave up realizing that PETA wouldn't even put effort into something meat-related that was so small and unknown. That's exactly why this parody is so important and eye-opening for us. Edit, I made a user account over a year ago for the Flash game, and not recently. PETA is 1,000 times more well-known than Super Meat Boy, and the fact that they went out of their way to make a parody like this is beyond flattering and amazingly helpful. First off, I want to thank PETA for helping us turn Super Meat Boy into a household name, and of course for making themselves look quite foolish in the process. See, Meat Boy isn't made of animal meat. He's simply a boy without skin, whose name is Meat Boy. But shush, don't tell him that. Now don't get me wrong, I have nothing against vegans or vegetarians. I was vegetarian for many years and was an animal control officer who saved animals for a living for a long time. I empathize, understand, and accept why people choose to eat and live as they wish, and obviously believe everyone should have the freedom to express themselves in any way as long as it doesn't hurt others. But I don't support an organization who's 100% against all animal testing, because that would mean my best friend in the world would be dead, not to mention his mother and many of my family members and friends who are also diabetic. Animal testing is important, but you came here to read about video games and flame wars via Twitter, so I'll leave you with this. It's hard to make a comeback to a company that is highbrow enough to compare concentration camps to chicken coops, but I'll try and close this with a joke that's a bit more lighthearted. How many PETA members does it take to change a light bulb? None. PETA can't change anything.
Gotcha, bitch!
Fancy Pants Man is the main character of the Fancy Pants Adventure series of Flash games. The reason he's on this iceberg is because he's one of the several cut characters from the original Super Meat Boy. In that same cutting room floor post on the Team Meat blog, Edmund listed a ton of cut characters from Super Meat Boy. However, even though most of them had art made for them, Fancy Pants Man, along with 3 other characters, did not. What's funny though, is that Edmund's reasoning for Fancy Pants Man not being in Super Meat Boy was, and I quote, "I forgot about him." That's alright, Fancy Pants Man at least got his chance to show up in Super Meat Boy Forever, right? Right? Super Meat Boy Galaxy is a game created by Aubrey Hesselgren as a 30th birthday present for Tommy Rafinis. Fun fact, Aubrey also worked with Tommy on one of his earliest indie games, Goo. While this game may seem like a mod for Mario Galaxy, it was actually made by Aubrey in Unity while the models were made in Blender. He also described Super Meat Boy Galaxy as a test to see how Super Meat Boy's physics and controls would feel in 3D. Initially, Aubrey seemed hesitant to release Super Meat Boy Galaxy as it was a present for Tommy, but a year after the game's original release, he would hold the game at ransom, note and all, and the price for its safe release, helping to raise 10,000 quid for the Samaritan's Charity for Suicide Prevention. The absolute horror. Honestly, this is a really cool way for Aubrey to get the fans involved as well as to help raise money for a good cause. What's more, even when the campaign didn't reach its goal, raising a solid 1,258 quid, Aubrey still released the game for free, which you can still download. Just an absolute bro overall. Original Meat Boy sketch auction. We all know that iconic art of Meat Boy giving a thumbs up, right? The cracked tooth grin that New Meat still plasters onto their garbage to this day? Well, if you were into Meat Boy at the right time and had a fat wallet, like me, then you could have had the chance to own the original sketch of that art. In December 2011, OneUp.com did a charity auction for the Red Cross featuring various sketches by different indie developers. Included amongst these was Edmund McMillan's original sketch for Meat Boy. Edmund also made a post promoting the auction where he jokingly said that the other side of the page might have concept art for an upcoming Team Meat project. The auction ended on December 12th, 2011, with the final bid being $365. Also, even though OneUp.com is no longer up, both the auction and the photos of the art that was auctioned off have thankfully been archived on Wayback Machine, all of which will be linked in the description. Original Meat Ninja sketch. Before starring the skinless boy we all know and love, the Flash game that became the original Meat Boy was going to have a different character. Created by Edmund as a part of a group of misfit superheroes, the Meat Ninja / Inside Out Ninja was created in response to Edmund growing tired of creating designs like Gish. As a result, Edmund made the Super Zeros, a band of heroes who, in his own words, had something very wrong with them, like some sort of major downside.
So many years ago, I came up with these characters I called Super Zeros. They were all superheroes with major downsides, and the one you would know the most would be the Meat Ninja, which would eventually become Meat Boy. But there were others, like Johnny Icicle Dick.
One of these was Meat Ninja, who Edmund described as a ninja that was super agile but had no skin, so he was in pain always, and if he touched anything, he would die. However, Edmund changed the character when he realized that John McEntee's engine felt similar to the game N, which already featured a ninja character. Thus, the hood was removed, and Meat Boy was born. WarioWare DIY. This entry refers to a Meat Boy minigame by Edmund for WarioWare DIY. To promote WarioWare DIY, Nintendo got a variety of studios and indie developers to create microgames. From March 29th to July 26th, Nintendo would release these under the Big Names section. In addition to figures like Masahiro Sakurai, creator of Kirby and the Smash Bros. Franchise, and Shigeru Miyamoto, creator of Mario.
What's his name? The guy that made Mario.
Oh, yeah.
His name's Mario Van Swinson.
Yamamoto.
No, Van Swinson. The guy that's modeled after him, Dr. Mario Van Swinson.
Other contributors included Fifth Cell, who made the Scribblenauts games, WayForward, who made the Shanty games, and Gaijin Games, who made the BitTrip Runner series. And of course, Edmund from Team Meat. The microgame itself is pretty simple, as you literally just walk in a straight line to get to Bandage Girl. Dr. Fetus also shows up if you win the game. Something that's really interesting though is that Nintendo released a behind the scenes video for all the microgames in this promotion. This includes one featuring Edmund creating the Meat Boy minigame. Surprisingly, they're still up on YouTube and pretty cool watches. SpongeBob SquarePants Finger Family video. This one is pretty straightforward. It refers to a now deleted video called SpongeBob SquarePants Super Meat Boy Finger Family Nursery Rhymes ABC Finger Family. I think I just got stage 4 terminal brain rot from reading that out loud. It features a Meat Boy SpongeBob. The video is no longer up on YouTube, and the only remnants of its existence are discussed on the Team Meat Discord, along with a meme edit being made by somebody on there. This is basically just a dumb inside joke amongst the Team Meat Discord members. Game commentary. To celebrate Super Meat Boy's 1-year anniversary, Edmund and Tommy did a game commentary over a playthrough by Man vs. Game. Released on Game Trailers and on Indie Game The Movie's Vimeo, the commentary is a great listen, as it features discussion of beta elements such as Fly Wrench originally appearing in the hospital and the original scene following Chad's defeat.
Yeah, no, but what is the character there? Isn't
No.
it a character war?
Wait, was it? No. Wait, was it? We mixed those around.
Fly Wrench.
It used to be Fly Wrench, but I actually think it's a normal warp zone now.
Yeah.
Because Fly Wrench is one of the later characters now.
Yeah,
which we can reveal at this point.
Yeah, we can tell.
Because I think that was the Jill.
Right? Oh yeah, it is Jill.
Jill is unlocked in this chapter. Originally, Jill was unlocked in Hell.
Yeah,
but we wanted to balance the characters a bit better. So the way the characters unlock are usually the more helpful characters for beginners unlock early. So Commander Video and Jill. Commander Video has the best control horizontally, and Jill has the best control vertically falling. And there's a few others, and that's kind of how we balance the more overpowered characters that are harder to control happen later, and Fly Wrench is definitely one of those.
OP.
This is a cutscene some people like and some people think is mean, again.
Oh yeah, well. Oh, why are you so mean?
Originally, it was different. On paper, it was much different. The original ending for this was CHA.D was just going to keep screaming uncomfortably, and like it was just going to get louder and more horrible. And instead this happened, and Danielle actually helped with this. She said it would be funny if he accidentally crippled him.
Yeah. Accidental crippling is always great.
Teh Internets video. This is referring to a video that used to be on Edmund's channel from May 12th, 2009. It was a tongue-in-cheek rant about complaints on the internet, or
the thought process that goes into being a retard on the internet,
as Edmund put it. Edmund later took it down, as people saw it as him not being able to take criticism, instead of just a joke similar to his other older skits, such as one where he and his wife Danielle make fun of their cat Guppy, the same one who inspired the one from Isaac.
Oh, Mr. Big Shot. It's Guppy. He's come to join us in his little suit. He put his tuxedo on, and now he's going to join us, the conversation.
Somebody's overdressed.
I'm going to put you in a bag and throw you off a bridge.
And put you in a bag and bang you on things.
Someone's getting a spanking.
You're so ugly you make blind kids cry.
I heard you got your brain examined, and they didn't find anything there.
It has been re-uploaded to YouTube by user Exatone. That's a really good name. Exatone. I want that one. I want that name. And is also on the extras of Indie Game the Movie. Not much else to say. Just a funny video that no longer is on Edmund's channel. Lost Super Meat World chapters. This is referring to Super Meat World levels that were accidentally deleted by a Super Meat World mod. In 2021, players began to notice that several Super Meat World levels were missing. Most notably was 6 levels from Cramps, the first fan chapter to be officially uploaded on the internets for the Xbox Live arcade version of Super Meat Boy. When somebody asked about this in the Steam community page for Super Meat Boy, one of the mods for Super Meat World responded explaining what happened. He said, and I kid you not, those levels were deleted by mistake, which is my fault as I was new to the system back then. I'm an admin for Super Meat World, and so I delete any levels that are troll/bad. When I first started, I accidentally deleted levels that were good due to the website I was using to be a bit buggy, so any levels deleted can't come back unless the uploader re-uploads those levels. Other than that, nothing can be done, sadly. Hope that helps! And in case you're wondering, no, this person was not fired and is still shilling and running his mouth to this day. Meat Boy is in capable hands, lads. Have no fear.
Please.
Hints at Super Meat Boy Forever, warp zones, and the story. This is one of the only entries that nobody involved in this project even cared about researching.
We don't give a
This one alleges that there were deeply laid hints within the conversations held by Team Meat coming up to the release of the new game, and I'm willing to bet a lot of those are purely coincidental. There's so many Team Meat quotes that nobody on the crew cared to do a deep dive on it. You're more than welcome to piece it together yourself and do the diving on your own accord, but for this one, it's pretty straightforward and not worth the chatter. IGN calling the game a Wii game. This is likely referring to IGN having multiple SMB videos labeling it as a Nintendo Wii game. Some people believe that this is gameplay from the WiiWare version of Super Meat Boy, but this is unlikely, as the WiiWare version was cancelled in December 2010, but these were released in May 2011. This was probably just a mistake on IGN's part, as they covered Super Meat Boy's development since it was first announced on Wii. Odd and awkward Team Meat interviews. This entry refers to the many old Meat interviews featuring offensive humor and moments where Edmund or Tommy make the interviewer uncomfortable. The latter is surprisingly uncommon for old interviews, as most interviewers were familiar with Team Meat's brash sense of humor, but is way more common in interviews from the late 2010s. Here's just a sample of some of the absolute chaos in these old interviews. Some of you may find this dated, but I'm sure some of you can get some mileage out of these.
Jack Draken asks, after Super Meat Boy, are you going to do Super Salad Boy?
Okay, I have a question for him. Isn't Drufkin that the official name for a pubic wig?
That's Birkin, but close enough.
Oh, okay. So, well, I think it should be the name for a pubic wig. So, I have to go to the store tomorrow and get fitted for my Drufkin.
And then go jack off.
Yeah.
That's why his name's Jack, because he jacks off all day.
This is a question for Tommy. So Danny B wants to know what it was like growing up in your native land of Subbaldistan.
Suck Balls-a-stan.
In my native land of Suck Balls-a-stan. It was tough. We had to suck balls to stay alive.
Yeah.
I still suck balls to this day, even though I don't have to.
You still cough up hair balls.
Yeah.
To this day.
Thank you, Danny B.
My sister I used to go into the bathroom. So we had one shared a bathroom basically, and I remember going in, and the first time this happened. This happened many times. First time this happened, and I go and I sit down on the toilet, and I look up, and there's a food tray in front of me with a half-eaten burrito and the telephone. And that was at the point when my sister was going through this phase where she would go microwave a chimichanga or a burrito, go into the bathroom, and sit down and talk on the phone while she ate her burrito while she took a shit.
Sarah Grail 7 asks, should Meat Boy be served well done, medium, or rare?
Come on! What the fuck, guys? Seriously?
God damn it.
Jokes. You, fuck off. Go ask dumb questions to somebody who cares.
That's good.
I'm allowed to buy the game.
You're on the block list.
Indie Asylum asks, what happens if you eat Meat Boy? Do you get special powers?
No, you fuck off forever and die!
Flashpunk asks a pretty serious question. He asks, is Super Meat Boy representative of either of your genitalias?
Like short and red?
Mine's constantly bleeding.
I don't know why, but when I see you drinking iced tea on an afternoon, I imagine you as like a slave owner. I don't know why that image.
You see Tommy and Django.
Yeah, no, I just imagine you look like Don Johnson from Django Unchained. Like basically
I
Colonel
have an
Sanders.
air of plantation owner. I understand.
That's the first thing I saw when I saw Tommy.
Well, now
That guy's gonna that guy's game is gonna be a success, and he probably owns some people.
I do own a few slaves. I'm gonna say it's a little fucked up, but you don't know how nice it is to have slaves until you have them.
I've been recording and I have a timer, so we hit slavery jokes before the 5-minute mark. It didn't even take us 5 minutes. I think that's a record.
Nice. We usually try to hold off until like we've gotten people into it, you know, like 20 minutes in.
Number one on leaderboards.
Oh man, I can't get that image out of my head anymore. I'm just gonna continue this podcast as if you are a slave owner. We're just gonna talk.
That's fine.
That's how I'm gonna conduct this.
Slave owner anyway. They all hate me.
Yeah, it's
he
just
sucks and he owns slaves. Get him!
Kill him! Like, all right, well, I go to Raleigh. There's all my friends, and I'll just kind of settle into that. Wow.
Sure.
Every girl there already has 3 kids by 19. Bam, instant family.
You could just skip to the end.
You go down to the food lion, pick yourself up a nice cashier. Instant family.
Oh God. They
Love
all live on your plantation together. That's all I can think of now.
Plantation.
That's just where my mind keeps going back to. You
Is
guys
that
have been
all?
saying
Yeah,
all this
every
really interesting stuff,
horrible
and I can
thing.
just not get that image out of my head.
Yeah.
Tommy sipping lemonade.
Lemonade.
With his cashier wife.
Colonel Sanders angrily grabbing a keyboard and smashing it against the wall.
When the
Throwing an
help-
iPhone.
When the help does bad, I just slam the keyboard down and they run away scared.
Don't get my dand up now.
Yeah. Don't wait to get my keyboard now, son.
Oh my God.
This is
Plantation
like
owner
a-
voices. So much.
It's sad that they're connected to like one of the worst atrocities in the history of American history because
They're
they
so
have
funny.
a really funny voice.
Edmund and Tommy were also very outspoken about the games industry. As shown earlier in the Iceberg, Team Meat had a lot of smack to talk about Microsoft. However, Team Meat was also incredibly critical of Indie Games Fest and the Game Developers Conference, who run IGF. Edmund and Tommy softball it, but what they describe of the IGF is genuinely messed up. Based on Old Meat's word, IGF judges didn't vote based on the actual quality of the game, rather they voted for what they felt was a game that needed the help, basically following their own agenda.
We now have some questions about the IGF.
Were you surprised that Super Meat Boy didn't pick up an IGF award?
Yes and
Yes.
no.
I'd say just yes.
Were you saw it losing to Monaco?
No, I wasn't sore losing to Monaco. If we lost anything else, I think we would have been a lot more upset. But I mean, I think underneath it all, I kind of felt like I knew that Monaco might win because of the situation with Gish in 2005 when Gish was going head-to-head with Alien Hominid for the grand prize. And we all believed that Alien Hominid was going to beat us because they had so much going for them and it seemed like a better game, mainstream-wise. And we won, and it seemed like there's the popular versus the underdog, and the underdog seems to always win. I think Cran Physics beat out World of Goo. Aquaria and Castle Crouchers were in the same IGF. It's always like that. It just seems like the underdog always seems to win. Which
they seem to treat it more like a scholarship more than an actual like.
Yeah, in that way, I know that we were pretty put off by the IGF.
And I've entered something in the IGF or been a judge every single year since, so I've seen this like wave, and things change over time, and it's kind of this bizarre thing where I think everybody involved wants the IGF to go one direction or the other, and it started out where back in the day, the first controversial game to enter was this game called Savage, which was the first $1 million game that was entered in the IGF. Wow. And it was like, indies were like, we fucking hate them because they have money and it's unfair.
Right.
And the second time was Gish versus Alien Hominid, and it was kind of like, the underdog won in that situation. Time passed, and as things kind of like leveled out, like I think over time, once indies had the ability to like make money off of their games and actually compete with the mainstream, and we're obviously doing a really good job about it, things kind of leveled out, and I think the IGF kind of turned a bit. And it's what started out kind of as almost like a scholarship situation where if your game was already out or well known or had a huge budget, you were penalized in a way. And it kind of leveled out to like everybody's kind of on a leveled playing field, and Minecraft and Fez, that situation.
Edmund would describe similar experiences when he did judging for IGF.
Oh, but for me, I had this thing in me where I'm like, I don't want to be this pessimist who just says it's hopeless, it sucks, and I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to be a judge. I don't want to do anything. But the thing is every year I'm a judge, and every year I come off with this feeling of just like, I don't belong here. Like, just a feeling of not belonging at all, and it's just arguments and opinions on opinions, and there's nobody's actually going by these rules that are set in place. They're just going by their own personal rule set where they think, that it's quite literally, there's arguments that are literally, hey, this person needs help, and I think letting them win will help, even though they like directly say this game is better than this other game, but this game needs some help. Let's make them win. And it's just like, oh my god, like there's so much wrong with that, and it's just so fucked up because not only does it fuck up the winner, it fucks up the loser. Like it's this horrible thing, and then it's just like, why even like if we're at this point now, why even enter a game if you've released it and it's done well? Don't enter. You're not going to win, because whatever agenda they choose is going to choose your fate. And it's just, you're dealing with people. You're dealing with humans who have their own personal agendas, and I mean, I can't say that I don't as well. I'm trying my hardest to go by the damn rule set, for each of the categories that I'm judging in. But like, I give up. I gave up this year. I couldn't be a part of it. I just take me off this list. I don't want to hear your opinions anymore, because every single opinion just makes me feel like the time I won, I didn't win, and the time I didn't win, I did.
Right.
That's it. And it's just this horrible reminder, and it makes me feel like shit. It makes me feel horrible. And
moreover, what Edmund described of their conduct also paints a community of very cliquey, elitist douches. Judges told Edmund and Tommy to their faces that they voted against them, claiming that they had done so because they already had enough money with the Microsoft deal, and the other games deserved the help more than them.
It was mostly, the people. There were a lot of people that came up to us before and after the awards that said, hey, I just want to let you guys know, I voted for Monaco because he needed it.
Yeah, because we didn't need it for something.
We already had the deal, or people coming up to me directly and saying, I voted for Monaco because you already won.
and stuff like that.
Two of these people were even Brian Crescente, founder of Kotaku, and Phil Fish, who literally voted against his own friends to look good.
If nobody had said anything, I probably would have not had these feelings. Like, if people wouldn't have come up to me and told me that the reason why they voted for Monaco is because we didn't need it, I would have felt a lot better about.
Yeah, but like when you have like 10 people come up and say that, even like prominent people like Brian Crescente at the awards ceremony. Well, what did he say? He's like, oh, you guys really don't need a win then.
Well, it's a 2-layered thing. Like, it pains me to have Phil Fish like directly tell me that he voted against. Like, he straight up just told us like, oh yeah, I was one of the many people, according to him, that voted against Super Meat Boy because I knew you guys were going to be fine.
Yeah, that was great right after we lost, is Brian Crescente coming up to us and saying, oh, you guys didn't really need it. And I'm like, wow, my sugar is 330 right now, and I have $200 in the bank. And I'm just probably going to go home and cry. You're right. I'm fine. I didn't need
Jesus.
It just paints the picture of a really snobby, self-important community. I can kinda see why Tommy keeps his distance from other indie game developers nowadays.
Well, whenever you lose anything, your brain always wants to in some way justify it to you. And you always look for a reason why you lost. Like if you lose the basketball game, oh, their defense was better. You know, you don't have people coming up to you after the game and saying, yeah, I kept clicking the +1 score on the other guys because the one kid's brother is in a wheelchair. Like that doesn't help. That doesn't help you. It doesn't help you grow, and it doesn't help you justify your loss to yourself. Because when you go into the IGF, you're like, oh, my game is great. And you always want to be like, the way you try to justify it in the IGF when you lose is like, I lost to a better game. Like when Goo lost to World of Goo, I'm like, yeah, I definitely lost to a better game. Still stung, but that doesn't sting nearly as much as, hey, Meat Boy lost and people were telling me because, oh, it's not because it was the better game, it's because you're going to be okay.
That's just the general gist of Team Meat's experiences at IGF, but we're not done yet, because in September 2022, way after the fact, Edmund would post more about being banned from speaking at GDC and IGF, stating, quote, due to my GDC talk ban, also banned from being on stage and entering in the IGF for an unknown reason, I'll be doing all remote talks that are requested for cons and colleges, others if they're cool, and more podcasts. Spread the word. I got another talk I did at USC coming. He follows this up in the same day by saying, for those asking, I'm not, spelled with a K, 100% sure why I was banned from GDC/IGF. It happened 8+ years ago, and I didn't know till recently when I was asked to intro an award, then when they said okay, they said no. It's possibly tied to me being critical and public about their judging that's supposed to say process. Edmund is not very good at spelling. What's even funnier is that Microsoft, the monolithic billion-dollar corporation, responded better to Team Meat's criticism than IGF.
Like, I know for a fact, and I've heard this from many different people that have told me this, that we, by openly talking about our relationship with Microsoft and the business side of Microsoft and the negatives that came along with that, they've actually, I believe, changed a lot of stuff. And I've heard from different developers that they have openly talked to them and said, we want to change our image and we don't want anybody to, we want everybody to be happy.
So, Microsoft didn't even blacklist these guys for trash-talking them, but IGF, the scrappy underdog that's here to go against the grain, bans you for criticizing their practices. Fantastic. Tommy's Vimeo account. This is referring to Tommy's Pretty Bear Vimeo account. In addition to featuring 2 videos about his earliest game, Goo, it also has a Super Meat Boy commentary. Since it's called Episode 1, it can be assumed that more were planned, but Tommy never followed up. Pretty straightforward entry. Quantum Mario is a hack for Super Mario World. Using a modified SNES emulator, players are able to see their various tries at clearing a level. This is typically used with Kaizo Mario levels, fan levels infamous for their brutal difficulty. The reason this is on the iceberg is because Quantum Mario inspired the replay system in Super Meat Boy. Tommy has spoken about this in interviews and even has some cool anecdotes about working out the replay system's kinks.
And what it was a modified Super NES emulator that, like, people would mod it and they made their own levels and stuff, but this one, they could overlay every attempt at the level and play it all at the same time. So what you had was, like, 128 Marios that were playing through this one level, this one really, really hard level. So like all the Marios would jump to this one platform, and then they would all jump to the next, but then like half of them would get hit by a bullet, and then like 10 of them would fall off this way, and 10 would fall off this way, and then it just sort of progressed and went through and through and through until there was just one Mario that kind of made it through. And as I was looking at that, I'm like, I can totally do that in real time, and I'm going to put this in Super Meat Boy, so I did.
Draw Team Meat Naked contest. To celebrate the 1-year anniversary of Super Meat Boy's release, Team Meat held the Draw Team Meat Naked contest. The name says it all. For a chance to win the Wacom tablet that Edmund used to draw Super Meat Boy, you would have to submit a drawing of Edmund and Tommy naked to Newgrounds. The contest winners and runner-ups were later posted on the Team Meat blog, all of which are incredibly not safe for work, but well drawn if nothing else. The true meaning of C.H.A.D.
C.H.A.D, what does it stand for? Fuck you, that's what it stands for.
Taking a look at the original user manual for Super Meat Boy will give you a ton of insight into the characters and the game itself. In the section for the game's second boss, C.H.A.D, it details a few interesting notes. Originally, he was going to have a fart attack that spewed enemies from the blood lake he swims in. Another interesting note, and the subject of the entry, is the true meaning of C.H.A.D is currently unknown, and if the true meaning were to come out, the game's age rating would need to be raised. This is nothing more than a silly joke on the part of Edmund, who took the name itself as inspiration from the 90s horror movie C.H.A.D. This is an anagram for Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dweller, which is the worst possible thing you could call someone online. The tidbit on C.H.A.D's name being too explicit likely riffs off the idea, as it's so undeniably offensive that the game would have to be silent about it. Vertigo. Vertigo refers to John McEntee's engine that was used to make Flash Meat Boy. In an interview with Blackthorn Prod, Edmund went into detail about Vertigo, describing it as being similar to N, and it coincidentally featuring a red square as the placeholder character.
I was approached with an engine. John McEntee was a fan of mine, and he contacted me. He's like, check out this engine. It was called Vertigo.
Okay.
It was this vertically scrolling tile-based engine, where a character mostly jumped back and forth from wall to wall. I thought it was really interesting, and the placeholder art was a red square.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I have a character who's basically a red square.
Tommyism.com. Tommy's old blog featuring blog posts on various topics and games made by him. Many archives are available on Wayback Machine, but it currently links to a page with text saying this is a test. Tommy's Lost Flash Games. This is talking about Tommy's deleted Newgrounds games and animations. Although there are currently only 3 games on Tommy's Newgrounds, Tommyism, that wasn't always the case. Using Wayback, you can see that Tommy had other games and animations that are no longer available, such as Tommyism Campaign 2000. There are also games that were posted onto his old website, Tommyism.com, that are no longer accessible. The games themselves have raked in reviews ranging from lukewarm to abysmal. At least Tommy hasn't changed in that regard. To say that Camdrome is a project shrouded in mystery would be a gross understatement. Camdrome is a horror full-motion video game that left the moment it arrived. First shown at PAX 2013, attendees were shocked to find something tucked away at the Indie Mega Booth. Amidst bright, colorful games like Runner 2 was a blood-covered computer monitor with a webcam on top of it. During the event, the monitor played disturbing and sometimes bizarre videos featuring different people being murdered by a doll-faced man. Between each clip was a logo featuring a bloody eye and the title. Camdrome. Attendees at PAX didn't know what to make of it, but many people noted the similarity to FMV games like Night Trap and Corpse Killer, and the heavy influence from David Cronenberg's cult favorite, Videodrome. But Camdrome wasn't just contained to PAX, as a Camdrome Twitter account would also begin posting on the first day of the event. In addition to posting cryptic messages, the Camdrome Twitter would also reply to journalists attending PAX. For example, Nick from 4Player Network had the Camdrome account reply to him with a gif of a woman getting her throat slashed. Moreover, in September 2013, journalists from other publications like Destructoid and Eurogamer received emails from 11@camdrome.com with the subject, Camdrome Lives. They read as follows.
We are not going to achieve a new world order without paying for it in blood as well as in words and money.
Our problems can't be ignored. We are the problem. I am the answer. We are in this together. I am humanity. 6, 8, 7, 4, 7, 4. You are one of 11.
Absolve yourself of guilt. Breathe life into me.
All of the emails were similar, except for at the end, where the recipients were said to be one of 11. They were also beckoned to absolve themselves of guilt and to breathe life into Camdrome. What's the significance of the number 11? Well, each email also included a part of an incomplete image. As you may guess, the rest of these were sent to other game journalists and other figures in the games industry. And while most of the articles showing who received the other 9 pieces have been lost to time, we can confirm some of the others thanks to the Super Sleuth blog. Some of note include Jonathan Soderstrom of Hotline Miami fame, and Cliff Bleszinski, who had a huge role in creating the Unreal Engine, as well as the Unreal series of games and the Gears of War series. And while most of the image would be completed, not all of the pieces would surface, leaving us with a somewhat unfinished but beautiful poster for Camdrome. There is way more to the Camdrome ARG, such as the Camdrome website, but needless to say, all of these stunts paid off, as both PAX attendees and the indie game scene as a whole were dying to find out what Camdrome was all about. But above all, the biggest question people wondered was, who was behind Camdrome? When asked about it, exhibitors near the Camdrome booth appeared just as confused by it as other attendees. One exhibitor even claimed that the booth had already been set up by the time he and his team first arrived on Friday morning. However, little did PAX attendees know, the culprits behind Camdrome were in attendance, but not at the Indie Games mega booth. They were on the same floor though, all the way at booth 125. A booth that was ran by Team Meat. After a ton of dead ends, 4Player Network, the same publication that received one of the Camdrome emails, were finally able to find a lead. Having done a search on who registered the Camdrome website, 4Player Network found that the site was registered by none other than Edmund McMillan. After googling the phrase Camdrome Team Meat, 4Player Network came across the resume for Doug Sackman, a director and SFX artist at Backseat Conceptions. The actual resume had already been pulled, as the link redirected to Backseat Conceptions' website. However, Google results still showed a sample of text from Doug's resume. The text read, "Horror video game to be released this fall by Team Meat, the creators of Super Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac." This led to 4Player Network theorizing that Camdrome was a Team Meat project, with Backseat Conceptions having done work on the cutscenes. It appeared that the jig was up, but when asked about Camdrome, both Edmund and Tommy remained coy about it. When Eurogamer presented 4Player Network's evidence to Edmund, he claimed, quote, "We really aren't involved in making Camdrome, but Tommy helped set up the booth there. We know the dev who is making it and have been helping. We believe in the concept, but don't actually know that much about the project other than its initial incarnation and the booth setup. We are as in the dark as everyone else on the current ARG, so it seemed like everything was going great for Camdrome, and while Camdrome would go silent, people were hopeful for its return at PAX 2014, but nothing. The Camdrome booth was nowhere to be seen at PAX. Even worse, Team Meat went on to announce Super Meat Boy Forever, killing all speculation of their involvement in Camdrome and leading people to take Edmund's claims at face value. Then PAX 2015 came, and Camdrome was still nowhere to be seen. Same with PAX 2016, PAX 2017, and so on. The years went by. Although the Camdrome Twitter would become active from time to time, no game ever surfaced. To this day, people are still left wondering what happened to Camdrome. Why would somebody make such an elaborate ARG just for nothing to ever come of it? Most people would end the story here, just giving some spiel about mysteries and fucking magnets. But not me, the captain of the sea. Because it later turned out that Edmund's story was bullshit. In the years that followed the Team Meat split, Edmund admitted that he lied about Camdrome being someone else's project, claiming, quote, "No, I lied. It was an FMV game I was making with James many years ago that got caught in IP limbo and became vaporware. Maybe one day, though, I own the IP now." End quote. Camdrome was always a Team Meat project. Edmund just lied so the mystery wouldn't be ruined. So what led to Camdrome being cancelled? Well, in an interview with Northern Lion, Edmund revealed why Camdrome never saw the light of day.
So Tapeworm, Isaac, and Camdrome. And Camdrome was like this totally insane FMV horror Pokemon Snap game that I thought was super cool, but would really, really bother a lot of people and probably cause issues more than Isaac would. And the person I was working on with it, one of them, got major cold feet about it and put their foot down and basically didn't want to be a part of it. That's one of the reasons why it died.
So, Camdrome was cancelled because someone on the team had gotten major cold feet, as Edmund put it. Besides Edmund, there were 2 other people working on Camdrome. One of them was James Id, who you may know for his sick-ass commercials for Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac. However, it's very unlikely that he was the one to get cold feet. James was invested enough in Camdrome to help Edmund run the Twitter account. And he's also no stranger to gore, with him even working on an NES-style slasher game. But that begs the question, who else worked on Camdrome? You may remember way back in Tier 1 when I talked about the Team Meat split. I mentioned that a huge factor in Edmund leaving was 2 of his projects getting cancelled, with one of them having the potential to cause controversy. That project was Camdrome, and the one who got cold feet on it was Tommy. In that same interview with Northern Lion, Edmund said his grievances with Camdrome's cancellation. His sentiments almost echo his feelings on Mewgenics' cancellation.
I want that again, though. I want that danger. I want that unknown. Like, I want to not care. I don't care, but I want to not care more. I want to just do whatever I want to do, put it out, not care about sales, not look at sales, not think about any success matrix or reviews. Just have fun, just like I used to, because I think not only will that make me a better person to be around, but it'll also make me a better designer in the long run. It just feels like charging my battery so I can do something bigger and better in the future.
Edmund would also talk about Camdrome on Twitter, saying, quote, Camdrome was in development for roughly half a year back in 2013, but was cancelled when I was a part of Team Meat. There was an ARG for it, just a weird teaser for a game that I loved and wanted to make, but couldn't. I own the rights now and would love to work on it again. End quote. As for Tommy, he hasn't said much in regards to Camdrome, but when asked about it on the Team Meat Discord, he had this to say, quote, Camdrome and Mewgenics are all up to Edmund. They ain't Team Meat babies anymore. A user replies, Edmund took some of the kids. Tommy replies, quote, I took the best kid. End quote. It's clear that Edmund and Tommy had wildly different plans for Team Meat, with Tommy wanting to work on Forever, and it's very likely that this inability to see eye to eye was one of the main reasons for Edmund leaving. As for the future of Camdrome, Edmund has shown interest in reviving the project, but considering he's working on Mewgenics, it's probably going to be a while before he absolves himself of guilt and breathes life into Camdrome. Huh? You like that one? I Want to Kill the Meat Boy creator draws animals getting abused. When researching the creator of I Want to Kill the Meat Boy, Marcevek, you might notice that all of his social media accounts have been absolutely wiped. However, going into Google Images is a different story, as you will find absolutely degenerate artwork. Marcevek is a member of the Fluffy Abuse community, a subsection of the My Little Pony fanbase that is dedicated to drawing fetishistic art featuring fluffy cartoon horses getting tortured in sickening ways. This community is a whole rabbit hole that has been covered by other YouTubers, but Marcevek is a particularly disgusting example, as he also has a scat fetish, which is a fancy word for pig, in addition to his degenerate gore fetish. Pictures of his work are sparse, but none of it is worthwhile. Truly a diseased rat with zero taste. Now if you'll excuse me, I'll be taking my bandage girl tickle torture and moseying on out of here. Okay, alright, don't include that part. www.thisisacryforhelp.com and the reason it was shut down. I feel like I should let Edmund's own words speak for this one. It's one of his most well-known pieces of history and his primary rise to notoriety. If you were in a good enough mental state and are interested in seeing it for yourself, and if you're interested in any of the other entries in this iceberg, the links will all be in the description for every single source. Made possible by Internet Archive's web tool, the Wayback Machine. This is the commentary that he wrote on the history of the website and furthermore why it was shut down. Thisisacryforhelp.com. In 2001, I decided to take a web design course at a local community college. Once I learned basic HTML, Dreamweaver, and Flash, I promptly quit school and started my career as an independent web designer. My goal was to take my comics online, turn them into animations, and get famous, something I was amazingly able to achieve online without too much effort. My first animation, Destination Egg, was released on Newgrounds.com, a site that was very, very new at the time. Tom Fulp was a big fan and promoted my work to the highest extent. I credit him for getting my name out to my perfect demographic, angst-filled teen boys. This Is a Cry for Help grew huge, quickly getting over 100,000 unique visitors a day. That was a lot back then, and building a large internet community of hundreds of totally crazy outsider teens looking to stick it to the man. I was actually making good money off of my site, that is till the internet crashed and 90% of the big indie entertainment, EN websites, went under. Can you believe that banner ads used to pay 25 cents a click? Now it's less than 1 cent per 100 clicks. Cry for Help lived on, and with all the big EN sites being killed by the crash, sites like mine, Newgrounds.com, TheStyleProject.com, and XEntertainment.com thrived. It wasn't long until I had quite a few popular series working their way around the net. The Dead Baby Dress Up was the headliner, bringing in millions of hits and working its way into many mainstream internet/art culture magazines. Features like the backup files of Freddy the Robot, Thicker Than Water, and my collection of hate mail and dirty jokes spread like wildfire. But it wasn't until I started making online quizzes that the real traffic started to roll in. Quizzes like What Serial Killer Are You and How Will You Die were posted on thousands of blogs and personal web pages, ripped off by hundreds of other websites. In late 2003, I announced that I was no longer doing content for Cry for Help and put the site in a stasis that would last a year while I tried to work a real job as an animal control officer. When I was fired in 2004, I came back to Cry for Help only to find out my fans had turned on me. The forum of Undying Love had viewed me as going soft and bashed me every chance they could get. I closed the forums and turned the site into a personal blog detailing my start as an independent freelance artist and game designer. The traffic dropped to about 30,000 views a day, and once Gish came out, I just kept it up as a place people could go to view my old work. In 2006, I got a phone call from a lawyer representing a mother whose daughter had committed suicide. The last thing she had viewed before she did it was my Best Way to Kill Yourself quiz. The mother viewed it as my fault. I didn't feel like arguing with a grieving mother, so I told the lawyer that I would at least put a warning on the quiz, pushing that the quiz was satire and not to be taken literally. 2 months later, I got another phone call from a different lawyer, this one from Seattle. He was representing a man who had killed his wife and cut her head off. The last website he visited was mine. He had taken the What Serial Killer Are You quiz a few days before. The lawyer asked if I was willing to come to Seattle to defend the guy who killed his wife, saying that the quiz was random. I said, no thanks. The next day, I got another call from the lawyer, this time telling me to come up, and if I didn't, he would subpoena me. I deleted everything on my website and told him to fuck off. That was the end of thisisacryforhelp.com. In reality, I had moved on from Cry for Help in 2003. I wasn't the angst-filled teenager I was in high school, and 90% of what I was doing just wasn't fun or funny to me anymore. I just kept it up because it was what I was known for. Thank you to everybody who stuck till the very end of the video. I hope you learned something. I know I did in the process of making this video. If you fell asleep during the video, wake the fuck up! Hey, you fell asleep. Rude ass. If you want to see more in-depth video game discussions, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, go subscribe to our alternative channels, which will also be linked in the description. For now though, thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna go rest my voice. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.